know it in my sort of strange curtained abode. But there you go. Michael, can you hear us? You all right? It's suspense. I tell you, I watched Mikel Arteta do a Zoom press conference yesterday, and he was genuinely cracking up as they went to journalist after journalist, and they were like all on mute. And Arteta
I can hear you.
Holding back.
There it is.
You can hear us, Michael Bailey.
That was seamless.
You are stood down. Go have a drink, relax, prepare for the Premier League in whatever fashion you feel appropriate. Michael, lovely of you to join us.
Hello there. Thanks for having me, James.
My absolute pleasure. Now, the first team on our agenda this evening, it is Norwich City. This, of course, is an absolutely massive period for Norwich City in the fight against relegation, and it starts with 2 home games. And I imagine those are going to be pretty pivotal in their chances of staying up this season.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to pin everything on it, but I probably should, because that's the reality of it, especially just from the outset. The Southampton game, I think even before lockdown, I was looking at it thinking, look, they're going to have to win this, because beyond that, they're not going to get the points that they need. So nothing's really changed. The only, I think the fortunate, in a way, situation for Norwich is that there's such a restart now. There's everything's gone out of the window from before, that we just don't know what we're going to get. We don't know who's going to be in good form. We don't know what Daniel Farke will have up his sleeve in terms of what Norwich need to do slightly differently. So all those unknowns definitely help Norwich, because they're in a position where out of everyone, they probably have the least to lose. So that's exciting. I mean, God, if we couldn't head into this at least being excited by Norwich's survival prospects, then we should probably give up. So I'm kind of clinging to that, really.
Yeah, I mean, the gap doesn't look pretty. The table doesn't look pretty, but Norwich play 3 of the 5 above them, I think I'm right in saying. So theoretically, I mean, it is still very much in their hands, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is. And I do, they are playing a huge amount of catch up. And I have to be honest, of the 3 months Norwich weren't playing, 2.5 of them I'd forgotten the table, which I think was probably a sane thing to do. So, and therefore you forget all the baggage with it as well. So, you know, you look at the fact that Everton, off the back of a Merseyside derby with 48 hours less recovery time, have got to head to Carrow Road. I mean, no one's really going to want to head to Norfolk at the moment in the middle of a pandemic. So all of these factors, you just don't know how they're going to play out. And the fact that Norwich will have the extra recovery time, and given everything has arrived so swiftly, and the levels of fitness are going to be reasonably questionable for the squads, they're 2 games that Norwich can earmark and just go, look at what we could do here. And I think, you know, it's probably why it's make or break so early for Norwich, because they can really set a narrative early on that, look, everything before doesn't count anymore. We've won back-to-back games for the first time this season, and we're breathing down your necks amongst some clubs that will probably be fearing the consequences of the restart maybe more than Norwich. If Norwich don't win those 2 games, then they're probably done. So it is literally that for now, and there's a bit of freedom with that. So it's exciting. And then after that, they do still play Brighton and West Ham at home and Watford away. So as you say, they're certainly going to have a say in it. We just hope it sort of involves them.
And who do you think will be the key men for Norwich in this period? I mean, who are the guys who could be the difference for them when it comes to staying up or going down?
Yeah, I think I don't think Norwich are going to come and suddenly start tightening up. I don't get the impression that's going to happen. So you're looking at players higher up the pitch. Norwich have literally announced in the last 12 minutes, or confirmed, that Andre Duda will be staying on loan for the rest of the season from Hertha Berlin. So that's good news. But essentially, Emi Buendia is a fantastic prospect who somehow hasn't scored a goal yet. So a restart might do him a favour in that regard. And he's a player with such quality. And then really it's Teemu Pukki, because the way he started the season was remarkable. And if he can rediscover that form, rather than maybe the baggage and the toe injury and all the sort of doubts that seem to be, and almost responsibility that were on his shoulders, it's those 2 in tandem. If you start getting a goal threat from Emi, and then Teemu starts rediscovering his form from the start of the season, then I think as a potent mix, those 2 could fire up something special.
Great. And what's your sense of sort of the mood within the Norwich camp? I mean, in some ways, I guess if they won a couple of games back to back, the break maybe came at a tricky time for them. It interrupted their momentum. Do you think that optimism is still there? And do you think it's given an opportunity to regroup and look at this really as kind of a playoff situation for survival?
Well, definitely, because Daniel Farker has already said this is a 9-game playoff and away we go. And I think for Norwich, it's probably condensed with all we've just said already as well. I mean, Norwich won their last home game at home against Leicester and played well, and there were a few promising signs. They played well at Sheffield United, but still lost. And so I think they ultimately went into the suspension on a bit of a downer. There's been a lot said about Norwich City over the course of the break, and I'm not going to. Most of that was people throwing accusations, maybe rather than the feeling in the camp. I think they are really excited about what they can do. The positive test probably just brought home a bit of the reality of the situation again. But I think, as I said, they do genuinely feel they've got nothing to lose, and I think that can be really powerful for them.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michael. Well, we've been joined by Greg Evans, who covers Aston Villa, one of Norwich's relegation rivals. Thanks for your time, Michael. Best of luck to Norwich, and we'll speak to you soon, I'm sure.
Cheers.
Hey, Greg, how are you doing? You having a good evening?
James, how you doing? You're looking very smart, mate.
I know. Well, look, I knew Carl was going to go for it, so I sort of had to try and bring it up a level to match him. He set a good standard. He set a high bar, and I've done my best to follow suit in a very literal sense.
I'm thinking just a standard little polo shirt isn't quite on your level, mate. But you know,
listen, I mean, you know, it's horses for courses, isn't it? So let's talk Aston Villa. They ended the Premier League, you know, the last period of the Premier League before the break in football with a pretty dismal performance. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, shocking. I think I've written a few times already over this lockdown period that Villa were gradually deteriorating to become, you know, the worst team in the league before the lockdown. It really was poor from them. You know, they were conceding goals for fun. They were just struggling to get any sort of results. They were 5 games on the row with defeats. I think if you look across the country, the break, you know, as crass as it sounds, it actually benefited them. There wasn't a team out there that probably needed that break more than any of them. So let's just hope that it's done them a favour and they've been able to regroup and reassess and we'll come back and hopefully get some wins and stay in the league.
Now, one man who's had quite an eventful lockdown is Jack Grealish. But if Aston Villa are going to stay up, surely he's absolutely key to their hopes.
Yeah, I mean, by far the best player in that team, an absolutely brilliant player. In really good form as well this season, scored 9 goals. The majority of them excellent. You know, every single goal's got a sprinkle of magic from Grealish. And I remember sitting next to you at the Emirates. When was it? September or October? I can't remember. Doesn't even feel like this season.
Very hard done by that day, weren't they?
Yeah. I mean, I just remember him. You know, he played very well there as well. And but look, you know, they need him to turn up. I'm sure he will. And if he does, hopefully, you know, they get the results they need.
It's not just him though. Aston Villa also welcoming John McGinn back into the squad. How important is he as a kind of lieutenant to Grealish in that midfield?
Yeah, definitely. You know, a big player. The two of them have got this on-field and off-field, to be fair, chemistry. You know, that they like to socialise together, and we haven't seen the two of them on the same pitch in 2020. So it's a big plus for Villa. You know, McGinn's energy and his enthusiasm, he just drives that team forward. And he scored a fair few goals as well. So it's vital for him. You know, I spoke to Dean Smith earlier in the week, and he said the key for this Villa team now is to not rely too much on Jack Grealish and try and, you know, bring the rest of the players and get them all involved. So let's...
And speaking of the rest of the players, I mean, at the back, they've really chopped and changed this season. We had a question from one of our readers, that's at LilWizard123 on Twitter, and they said, who do you think starts in goal for the remainder of the season? What do you think, Greg?
Well, first of all, thanks for the question, Lil Wizard. That's a very strong Twitter handle game right there. But well, Villa have actually got 3 goalkeepers to choose from now. Pepe Reina, the experienced of the 3, Orjan Nyland and Jed Steers heading back now. But I think it will still be Reina. He's just key to the way that Dean Smith wants to play. Obviously, his ability with his feet is a key component, and he's got a big personality, and that's what Dean Smith and his coaching team are looking for. So, but just looking back on the last few games of Reiners, he did struggle, to be honest. He was very poor at Southampton and a couple of errors against Leicester. And obviously he had coronavirus himself, so it's been a tough couple of months for him. Hopefully he can recharge, and you know, because we all know how much of a quality goalkeeper he is.
And what about in front of that? I mean, I'd imagine Tyrone Mings is going to be pretty pivotal to stuff, but how do you see that rest of that back four being comprised when Villa get back into action?
Yeah, well, as you say, they've chopped and changed quite a lot. I think they've had 12 different back four or goalkeeping variations this season, which just shows, highlights some of their struggles, really. There's just no continuity or stability in that team. I think what they've got to do is pick a back four or five and stick with it. Obviously, Tyrone Mings is key to it. Looking forward to hearing sort of some of his screams and howls during the games, because he's a very vocal presence for Villa. But obviously, in a normal scenario where there's 45,000 fans in there, you can't hear what he's saying. So that'll be very interesting indeed.
Do you think the broadcasters might have to kind of pull down the mic a few times with Tyrone Mings?
I think they might. Yeah, I don't know if he's foul-mouthed in his rants, but he certainly lets his players know if they're not performing. So we'll see what it's all about.
Fantastic. And looking at that Aston Villa fixture list, I mean, there are some tricky games on there. Liverpool away, United at home, Everton away, Arsenal at home. Do you think it's really vital with 2 home games straight away? They get off to a really good start.
Yeah, I think the key for them is the Sheffield United game. They've got to get off to a flying start. Just win that game, get out the bottom 3, and that's great for confidence, isn't it? And then they can go from there. 6 out of the 10 games at home. I know they haven't got the whole end screaming them on, but I think they'll prefer to be at home rather than having to travel up and down the country. Thanks
so much, Greg. Really appreciate that. We're now going to be joined by James. Peter Rutzler. Cheers, Greg. Peter, you are our Bournemouth correspondent. How are you doing this evening? You all right?
Yeah, very good, James. Very good. I saw you and Carl were dressed very smartly, so I had to run around and grab a shirt. So I'm ready to go now.
I mean, it looks smart. I'm genuinely wearing shorts to go with it. I refuse to wear long trousers until I absolutely have to. Probably when I go to a Premier League game, it's the first time, and I've done it for about 110 days. But fantastic. Good to have you on the line. And if you just joined us, we're talking all 20 Premier League teams today. And you can subscribe to The Athletic at theathletic.com/all 20 teams and get yourself a 40% discount in the process. But let's talk Bournemouth, because they face a monumental period now between now and the end of the season. The stakes for Bournemouth are so high, aren't they? Financially, the implications of relegation would be enormous.
Yeah, no, it's a very challenging period for Bournemouth. These next 9 games are huge, and I don't think that's understating it. I think for all clubs that go down, there is the financial implications of that, and because the disparity between the Championship and the Premier League is so high. But Bournemouth are very reliant on the television money. That's very clear. It's really well known, and coupled with the potentials for the rebate and whatever, and that puts a real squeeze on the club. So yeah, there's no hiding away from how much of an impact going down may have.
But let's find something for Bournemouth fans to be excited about here. I mean, there are a couple of exciting attacking players we've not really seen very much of at all recently on the way back that could be really influential for them.
Yes, absolutely. So the big thing about lockdown for Bournemouth has just been refreshing the squad. Clearing those injuries that have just dogged the team throughout the season. I mean, nearly every player has missed a game this season. Who's made an appearance has missed a game through injury, and that's been a key factor in their struggles. But now you've got David Rooks coming back, who's such an important player for Bournemouth. He's been out, he hasn't played a competitive game, I think, for nearly a year. And that's a huge miss, because he's very good on the counter-attack. He's such a creative influence. He had a brilliant debut season last year. So having him back, I mean, one thing, it's a morale boost, but his quality in attack will be so important. And on the other side too, Arnaut Danjuma is another player we haven't really seen too much of. He's struggled with foot injuries throughout the season. He made a few appearances, but he's really highly rated, and that's an exciting bonus, especially with all the uncertainty about Ryan Fraser at the moment. Having those 2 wingers in the squad fit and fighting, that's a real bonus with the 9 games to come.
And Bournemouth, they've got some tricky fixtures, but under Eddie Howe, they're playing a different kind of game now, maybe looking to counter-attack a bit more. Do you think in a funny sort of way, some of the tougher opponents they've got between now and the end of the season, it might end up suiting them?
Yeah, in a weird way, yeah. I mean, their fixtures are, they're pretty horrible. The first few, obviously, Palace is such an important game on Saturday, but you've got Wolves and Newcastle, both tough games. But then, as you say, they've got Leicester to play, they've got Manchester City to play away, Manchester United to play, Leicester, Tottenham. I mean, it's not pretty. But as you say, they are better suited on the break. Their best performances this year have actually been against the better teams. They beat Man United at the Vitality. They beat Chelsea away, and they played really well at Tottenham, played well against City. And just before the lockdown, they really pushed Liverpool and felt pretty unlucky not to take anything from the game. So that will give them real confidence when they're looking at what is a really daunting fixture list.
Absolutely. And do you think there are any players, particularly at Bournemouth, Peter, who maybe weren't having the best of times before the gap, who might have benefited from this period, who could return refocused, renewed, and maybe find some better form?
Yeah, I think the one you'll really want to keep pushing on is Callum Wilson. I think during the difficult winter period, he had struggled, and that's sort of a product both of maybe his form, but also the team's creativity issues. And just before the break, they did really see an upturn in form, and they were creating more chances, they were more fluent, they were pressing better. And Callum Wilson was scoring too. And that will be a big bonus for him. And I think he'll be so important that he does, pick up his goal scoring form of last year and carry that on for the remaining 9 games, especially if they want to stay up.
Great. Well, I can see that Adam Leventhal, our Watford correspondent, has joined us. So, Peter, thanks so much for your time.
No problem. Thanks, James.
Hi, Adam. How you doing?
I'm very well. I didn't mean to barge Peter out. Was that very rude of me?
I'd had enough of him. Get rid of him. Let's get on to the next one. All these relegation rivals back to back.
I know. Yeah.
But do you know what's really funny? We're talking about teams who are in a scrap to go down, and they're right in the midst of it. But because it is the sort of eve of the Premier League restarting, because everybody misses football so much, there is so much optimism that abounds. You speak to people close to any club, they really believe that in the next 10 games or whatever it is, it could be their time, that they could turn the corner, that this break is going to work for them specifically. Do you get that sense of Watford as well?
I would love to say yes. I'm probably a little bit sort of glass half empty at the moment in terms of Watford's chances, because it has been such a sort of strange time for the football club. And obviously, we're concentrating right now on the relegation threatened teams. And the vast majority of them, some publicly and some not so publicly, have basically said, or been briefing that, well, yeah, we would be quite happy if the season had ended at the beginning of lockdown and we weren't having to play out the remainder of the season. So I think it's having to get everyone's minds sort of retuned into it, and it's who adapts to that best. And I think that in Nigel Pearson, Watford have someone that is going to certainly do that. He's going to get his team focused, psychologically ready, and he's not going to allow anyone to sort of give half measures. So I think in terms of that side of things, yes, it's been a disappointing season, but Nigel Pearson will have had an opportunity to maybe connect a little bit more with his players over this period of time via Zoom and doing what we're doing right now. And yeah, hopefully they can attack this with a fresh mindset and think, yeah, we've got 9 games, some more difficult than others, and we can get the points that we need. Fingers crossed for him and for Watford anyway.
They need to attack it, don't they? Because they finish with, I think it's, let's have a look, Manchester City and Arsenal in their last 2 games. So it would be very helpful if they could get some points on the board early on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. They're not going to be budgeting any points from those final 2 games, especially considering what has happened to Watford against Manchester City in their last 2 meetings. 14 goals conceded, none scored. And it's been pretty much an embarrassment whenever Watford have faced Manchester City. So they won't be looking for any points against them there. But then you never know. Who knows what the season is going to look like by that time. So even Watford could get points against Manchester City. Obviously, they did so well against Liverpool. They beat them 3-0. So there's no reason why they can't potentially get points in those 2 games. But they will be, of course, looking at some of the other fixtures. They start against Leicester. That's going to be tough. They face 3 of the current top 4 in Leicester, in Chelsea and Man City. They also face Arsenal as well. And it's going to be the games prior to those last 2 against Norwich at home, Newcastle at home, and then West Ham away, which will ultimately decide whether they stay up or they go down.
And Adam, I just wanted to ask you, because we're all sort of sat here wondering what this new Premier League might look like, might feel like. I understand you went to a kind of dress rehearsal, really, and experienced what a match day is going to be like. Can you just give us a bit of insight as to your experience there? What it was like?
It was very interesting. it was slightly soul destroying, I must be honest, because, you know, it was such a sterile atmosphere, and yeah, we were wearing face coverings and there was plenty of, you know, hand sanitizer and stuff. Everyone was very keen to sort of follow all the protocols. But then in a way you sort of thought, well, we're going to just get used to this. And I heard you talking to Carl a little bit earlier on in terms of what are you looking forward to when you sort of focus on the players that are going to be very loud. I found that the most fascinating thing, that you really, really get an insight into who is a talker, who is, you know, someone that really encourages their teammates. And Ben Foster had been talking in the build up to the game, actually, that teams are going to have to develop ways to G themselves up. And it was very noticeable that Ben Foster was the person that was, you know, giving out encouragement throughout that game, and you could hear it throughout. So it's almost like the players without the fans have to become their own cheerleaders.
Yeah, and that provides its own kind of atmosphere, I guess.
Yeah.
One player I'm really looking forward to seeing at Watford is Sarr. I mean, he was so exciting just towards the end of this period. I think since Nigel Pearson came in, he's really taken off. Are you hoping and thinking for their chances that he really needs to hit the ground running?
Yeah, he has to hit the ground running, and running fast, because that's what he does so well. And he was so instrumental in that revival period when Nigel Pearson took over. They won 4 games out of 5. And over a 9-game period, he actually picked up an injury, and Watford suffered with form when he wasn't there. His goal involvement was pivotal to Watford's chances. He was involved in 7, 4 goals, 3 assists. And I mean, it's just the threat level raises when he is in that Watford side. It pushes the opponents back. They fear him getting in behind. They fear him attacking the left back. And he's a really good supply line as well. He gets the ball in the box, and he's also a poacher. He's willing to make that extra run, as we saw against Liverpool. He scored 2 goals. He got in behind. He also gambled at the near post. So yeah, if he can stay fit, Watford have an even greater chance of staying in the Premier League. And yeah, and he's a wonderful player to watch. So fingers crossed for him and for Watford that everything joins up in the right way.
They pulled off that incredible result against Liverpool, and I feel like after that we can't write them off at all. Anything really is possible. But Adam, we're going to move on to West Ham now. So thanks so much for your time this evening.
No problem. Take care, everyone.
Hello, Roshane. We're joined by Roshane Thomas, who's our West Ham correspondent. How are you doing this evening?
I'm all good, must say. You look very well dressed. Very well dressed.
I like what you're wearing too, actually, to be honest. I mean, really do.
I was going to buy a shirt from Primark, but the queue was really long yesterday. So,
yeah, the queue has been kind of crazy. I'm sorry that we're kind of barreling through like this. It's a bit like the Premier League. We've got a lot to get through in a very short period of time. When it comes to West Ham, Roshane, I mean, I was doing a bit of research looking at their teams over the past few weeks before football stopped. And I can't quite figure out how David Moyes is going to play it. What kind of shape, what kind of system do you think he's going to apply once football gets going again?
Well, when he returned to the helm, he experimented a little bit. He played like 5 at the back. He played 3 in defence. He played the wing backs, but it didn't really have the results he would have desired. So before the unforced break, we saw like 4-4-2, 4-1-4-1. I mean, personally, I think 4-1-4-1 is the formation to go, because West Ham have played so well. Whenever they play that formation, I mean, my mind goes back to the goal draw against Aston Villa. I mean, Declan Rice was the man of the match. The team played well, kept a clean sheet, which has been quite rare this season. And against Liverpool, same formation as well. Came close to beating Liverpool's very unbeaten records in the league. So I feel like that's the formation to go for the remaining 9 games.
And, I mean, look, West Ham fans are going to kill me for this, but their new stadium, it's not always been the happiest hunting ground for either the team or the supporters. I mean, you know, there have been problems there, teething problems. There have been issues with unhappy fans. Do you think, in some kind of crazy way, the absence of fans in that stadium might take a bit of the pressure off, and it might actually help them?
Yeah, I mean, it will be a unique experience, that's for sure. And if anything, it could be a help rather than a hindrance for West Ham, because I think I'm right in saying out of the bottom 6 teams, only Norwich have a worse record at home. And just thinking about Stuart James' piece where he said like players who do one training but struggle in matches. I think of like out of form players like Lanzini, Felipe Anderson, to an extent, Alpha Masuaku. Now, they should be in the element now, because if they make a mistake or if they have a chance at goal, we won't have 60,000 fans screaming at them. So
it's such a good point. Yeah, I mean, we always hear about players who train really well but don't necessarily turn up on a Saturday. Sometimes you get a player who's the opposite. Patrick Vieira at Arsenal infamously was a terrible trainer all week, but then when he was in that tunnel before a match day, really focused up. So I do wonder if there might be players who shine in a way that we're not expecting. The Stu James piece you mentioned is really excellent and worth checking out. I mean, one player I'm interested in as a guy who covers Arsenal is Jack Wilshere. And I understand, I'm sort of crossing my fingers that I don't jinx anything, but I understand he is fit, correct?
Yeah, he's fit. I mean, I've been praying to God for the past 2 months. So I want to say thank you very much for answering our prayers. But yeah, I mean, he's fully fit. And if anything, this break would have given Jack a chance to really motivate himself to prove people wrong. Because, as you mentioned, he's struggled a lot with injuries. So it's a great chance for him to become a key player for West Ham, because my mind goes back to the cup game against Newport County. I think I'm right in saying he scored in that match. And after the game, all the journalists are like, do you think he'll still play for England? I mean, will you become a captain for West Ham one day? That was the narrative at the time. So, yeah, I feel like he has a key role to play in the remaining 9 games.
And another guy who really impressed me earlier in the season, impressed me so much, I put him in my fantasy team, and so I was really gutted when he got injured, is Yarmolenko. Do you think he's got a chance to make an impact between now and the end of the season?
I mean, I put him on my fantasy team as well, and he got me no points. Yeah, I feel like, again, Yarmolenko, a great player, but with Yarmolenko, whenever he gets going, he suffers an injury, which has been, unfortunate. So, I mean, the game against Bournemouth, he scored 2-2 draw. He was really good in that match. And it's only a few years ago, people were like, this guy could be the Nishchenko. So if there's a time to become the Nishchenko, I mean, now is the perfect time. So, yeah, hopefully he also plays well, similar to Jack Wilshere.
And a couple of massive games coming up for West Ham. You can't avoid them on that fixture list. 2 London derbies against Spurs and Chelsea. I mean, they won't have the same kind of atmosphere we used to, but how important are they going to be for this team?
Yeah, and just looking at West Ham's fixtures, I think it helps in that the first 3 games are in London. So you don't really have to travel much. I mean, the home game against Wolves, away match against Tottenham, and the home match against Chelsea. And this season, West Ham have shown they can beat anyone on their day. I mean, they beat Man United 2-0, probably the best game of the season against Chelsea in the 1-0 win, which was really good. And then, as I mentioned earlier, came close to beating Liverpool. So on their day, West Ham can beat anyone, in my opinion. So, yeah, it's a tough running, but I mean, West Ham can do it. For me personally, it's the games against Newcastle, Burnley, Norwich and Watford, which are really important, because for some reason West Ham struggle against the lesser opposition teams. So that's the fixture where West Ham have to at least get 6 points, if anything, out of a possible 12.
Great. Look, Roshane, thanks so much. Congratulations on your remarkable hoodie. It's genuinely brilliant. I look forward to reading all about West Ham from you and what remains of the season. Cheers.
No worries. Take care.
We're joined now by Andy Naylor, our Brighton correspondent. Andy, how are you doing this evening?
Good evening, James. How are you? Here from the sunny coast. Looking forward to the Gooners coming on Saturday.
Yeah. Well, that'll be a really interesting game. I tell you, the reverse fixture really showed what Graham Potter's teams can do. I mean, would that be their performance of the season, would you say?
Probably. They like playing against North London because they hammered Spurs at the Amex before that in October. Yeah, that night they come off the back of Liverpool a run for their Anfield, and they put in a really good performance, and I thought were worthy winners. They
were, and it was as an Arsenal man myself, it was a difficult night, but I had to marvel at what Graham Potter's done. And it's kind of interesting at Brighton because it feels like there are kind of 2 things happening. Obviously, they're in a relegation battle, and that's very much a focus on the short term. But looking at what they're doing there, looking at that club, looking at the kind of coach they've appointed, they really strike me as a club with a long-term plan. And how important to that long-term plan is staying in the Premier League?
Very important. But that's exactly why Graham Potter was appointed. That's why they sacked Chris Hughton at the end of last season. I mean, Chris did a fantastic job, got them up to the Premier League, kept them up twice, 15th, 17th. But they felt they needed to take that next step, which is always difficult in the Premier League, isn't it? The kind of fact, seeing constantly struggling against relegation, a team that's looking over their shoulders. They want to reach a stage where they're not doing that in the long term. It's going to be a gradual process. They're looking down the line, sort of becoming established top 10. And they felt Graham Potter was the man to deliver that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we mentioned that home game against Arsenal. They've got some massive home games, Brighton, and how important do you think their home form is going to be in deciding whether or not they're still here next year?
Well, you look at fixtures, 5 of the last 9 at the Ajax, Arsenal, Manchester United, Liverpool, Man City and Newcastle. So that looks pretty daunting. I've got a funny feeling, in a strange sort of way, behind closed doors might actually help them. The Amex can get a little bit edgy sometimes, although to be fair, they do get behind them when they're kind of the underdogs. But clearly their form at the Amex is going to be important. But they've got it within them to get good results away, as proved at the Emirates. So you're looking at those other games. They go to Norwich, Southampton, Burnley. Their first one up, Leicester, 3 days after Arsenal. That looks tough. But I think they've got enough about them, both home and away.
And listen, if there's one team who's comfortable when it comes to a dramatic finale at the end of the season, this is Brighton on home turf, isn't it? I mean, this is what they do.
Exactly. There's never a dull moment. Every season, well, for as long as I can remember, I think it's 2 of the last 20 years when they finished mid-table. So there's always been something riding on the end of the season for Brighton, either at the top end or the bottom end. So never a dull moment down here.
And who could be the key man for them? Who's the guy who's going to keep them up this season? Who should the fans really be looking to save them?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because one of the things I think about the squad Graham Potter has now, they haven't got really one outstanding player, star names. But another aspect I think that could help them in this, lots of games in a short space of time, he could almost field 2 11s with not a lot to choose between them. So the depth of their squad is very good. But one name to look out for, Alexis McAllister, young Argentinian who they signed, stayed on loan in Argentina, was on loan at Boca Juniors, huge club, did well there. They brought him back in January. We've only seen the glimpse of him in the last game at Wolves. He came on 10 minutes from the end, straight away, demanding the ball, taking set plays. I don't want to put too much pressure on him. He's only young, but I think he might just be a surprise package.
Very exciting. I don't think there's anything more exciting as a football fan as a sort of promising young player who's just arrived from South America. That must be a thrill for Brighton fans. Well, listen, thanks so much, Andy, and best of luck to Brighton this season. And I might well see you on Saturday.
Yeah, look forward to it, James, with the
All
masks.
Right. Cheers, mate. Yeah, I'll have the mask on. Don't worry about that. Carl, good to have you back.
Hello again.
How are you doing?
Good.
One of our colleagues just texted and said that this is a bit like on Eurovision, where they go around all the countries at the end to give the scores.
Hello from Southampton.
It is a bit like that. But it is great. I mean, it's fascinating chatting to all these different people about their teams. And that is one of the brilliant things about The Athletic. We do have an assigned correspondent for every single Premier League club. We talked about a lot of things tonight. Adam Leventhal giving you the insight on, you know, what it's like going to be like at these games behind closed doors, the journalists having to wear the mask, what that experience is. Talking about that Stu James piece about, you know, what players can cope with the atmosphere of a crowd and which can't, and which might flourish and blossom in this new atmosphere. If you want to read stuff like that and more, you can sign up at theathletic.com/all20teams. Whichever Premier League team you follow, there'll be something for you there. But Carl, we've got to talk Southampton now. Now, they are almost certainly safe in mid-table. Southampton fans probably won't want me to jinx it, but they're all but mathematically safe. So what is this period in what remains of the season about for Southampton?
It's about proving they can play when there is technically no pressure. So yes, they're as close to being mathematically safe as you can be without being mathematically safe. If you're one of the stats people, I think it's got a 4% chance of them getting relegated right now. But the big thing that happened during lockdown, other than Southampton being the first Premier League team to agree to a wage deferral, was Ralph Hassel got a new 4-year contract. So he'll be manager until 2024, which is preposterous in footballing terms. And it's one of those things of, oh, right, that's what Southampton want to be for the next 4 or 5 years. Up until, you know, the next Euros, they're going to be this high-pressing, high-energy team. And if they don't get on board what Hassel wants, they can go. So now it's a case of a number of loan players and a number of certain players are going to be going, I'm going to be a Hassel player and I'm going to prove myself.
And am I right in saying that the pressing is really the key to that? I mean, when Southampton press, they're pretty good. And when they don't press, they're somewhat less good. And for some reason, they don't always seem to be able to deliver it consistently. What do you put that down to?
I think it's down to having some interesting football players, shall we say. So when you play this very robust, high pressing, like German school, energetic style, if anyone's watched the socially distant Bundesliga, you'll see a lot of the defense works on 1v1s. And generally, if the defender makes his tackle, everything looks good and happy enough, and hooray. If the defender misses his tackle, oh, that's a very obvious goal you've just let through. And that's what's happened to Southampton in some very obvious games. So their last game before the suspension was against Newcastle, where Jan Varre just sort of chested a ball, didn't really hear that, and San Maximin was behind him. San Maximin snuck in and scored, and that was the difference. Just one defender making a mistake. And when it works, it works. And Southampton have beaten Spurs, they've beaten Chelsea, they've bloodied the noses of nearly every team in the Premier League. When it doesn't work, they lose by that many goals.
Yeah, we all remember that. But speaking of goals, I mean, one man I suppose who's got something to prove, something to play for is Danny Ings. I mean, he was in such tremendous form. You kind of wonder, he must have been wishing that Euro 2020 was happening this year, because I think he would have been in with a really good shout.
Oh yeah, he'd have definitely made the friendlies against Italy and Denmark in March, I believe. Danny Ings, I think, has sort of put to bed any return for Jamie Vardy coming back, because they're quite similar and they can play in the shoulder last man. They can like counter-attacking and like getting a shot off, except Ings is a bit younger and wants to play for England, where Vardy is much more comfortable, being a family man now. I think Ings now is definitely going to show that this isn't a hot streak. Again, I'm a bit of a stats person, and I'll say he got, I think it was something like 15 goals in the XG of 11. So that's good and lucky. Now let's prove that he's good even when he's unlucky.
Yeah, he's pretty impressive as far as I can see. Well, Carl, we've got the Newcastle guys waiting. They've been doing
the dream team.
They've been doing a lot of waiting for that takeover, so I better move over to them. But you'll be back very shortly, I hear, with Daniel Taylor and David Ornstein. So I'm looking forward to that, Carl.
I'll wear my best suit. Oh no, I'm already in
it. See you in a bit, mate.
See you in a bit.
Okay, we're now joined by Chris Waugh and George Culkin, who are covering Newcastle United for us. How are you doing, guys?
Yes, very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm enjoying this. It's been a refresher. I mean, at the start of this, I wasn't even sure what Southampton were up to, but chatting to Carl, I've got a bit more of insight, a bit more invested in the Premier League. I feel sorry for you guys as Newcastle fans. You've endured so much in the last 13 years, whatever it is, that Mike Ashley's been...
50 years. 50 years.
How are you feeling, George? Everyone else is sort of kind of excited, elated, the Premier League's back, but you're kind of trapped in this purgatory waiting for this takeover to go through or not. Can you tell us what that experience is like?
Yeah, it's torturous. I mean, if I said I was loving life at the moment, I would be telling a complete and utter lie. So I won't say that. But football is back, and we're very excited. The problem with Newcastle is that if you start talking about the football, then you're going to have a very depressing conversation, because the football this season has been absolutely terrible. So we've had the takeover to talk about for a little while, and that was very exciting, and we all got very upbeat about that. And then that's just dragged on and dragged on and dragged on, much in the same way that we've been living life in limbo because of lockdown and so on and so forth. The club has just mirrored it completely. And so the chance that I think we thought we had that Newcastle could be coming back with new owners and kind of fresh momentum and something really to look forward to has not quite happened. And it's hanging over everybody. It's hanging over us. Chris would, I'm sure, would agree with me. It's hanging over fans. It's hanging over the team, and it's hanging over the prospective buyers and the sellers.
Yeah, I mean, the other person it must be hanging over, Chris, is Steve Bruce. I mean, what a weird position he's in, not really necessarily knowing the future direction of the club. Do you think this is a particularly odd time for him as Newcastle United manager?
Well, very much so. I mean, this is the job he's always wanted. He grew up as a Newcastle fan. He's a Geordie. He was desperate to get this job last summer, and he got it in turbulent circumstances. He replaced Rafa Benitez. Wasn't popular at the time when he came in, but he's done a steady job. He's got Newcastle to 13th as they are now. They're into the last 8 of the FA Cup, which is the first time they've done that in the whole of the Mike Ashley era. And now Steve Bruce is sort of waiting and wondering what's happening to him. The prospective new owners haven't had the opportunity to speak to him yet, because obviously they're not in the building. They've asked to, but they're not there yet. And then he hasn't had any communication directly from Mike Ashley. So he's wondering, almost this is a job audition for him to a certain degree the next 9 or 10 games. If there is going to be a takeover, does he need to solidify his position? And so it's a very strange time for everyone. And that uncertainty, as George says, just creeps into every single element at Newcastle United at the minute.
And I know the football hasn't been the most fun this season, but a couple of guys who I think are really good fun to watch, even if you're a neutral, are Miguel Almiron and Alan Saint-Maximin. Are they kind of the shining lights? Are they the reason for anybody to tune in to Newcastle games between now and the end of the season?
Certainly. Yeah. I'll let you go, George. You go.
Well, no, I mean, yes. I mean, Alan Saint-Maximin has that sort of sense of the unknown. I mean, chances are he'll get the ball, run with it for a little while and then fall over. But he does have the ability to do something unexpected. The problem, of course, is that Newcastle are often so deep that, you know, it's very difficult for him to kind of get up the pitch. Almiron has that blistering pace, which is kind of great. And but I mean, it's very difficult to be angry at the team because it's such an honest team. They have amassed over the last sort of 2 or 3 years a group of good characters. And I know that's a cliche, but it is true. And you can forgive them a lot because you know that they're trying very hard and you know that they care about the team and care about the club. And that's, you know, that has been kind of one of the stories of this season and a few seasons, you know, on the trot now. But they are difficult to watch. There's no getting away from that. Rafa turned them into a defensive team because he was so scared about the prospect of relegation that he thought that was the best way to get points from a game, and they've regressed this season. There's no doubt about that. It's been really tough to watch.
But George, I mean, it's kind of sod's law that Newcastle are doing all right in the FA Cup in a year where their fans wouldn't be able to attend a semi-final or final. But how much would that mean to the club if they could progress into the later stages of that competition?
It's such a difficult question to answer. I mean, the club have not won anything in my lifetime, and I kind of long ago gave up, you know, that as a kind of realistic prospect, and my life became much more peaceful from that point. You know, I love the idea of them going to Wembley, but the idea of them going to Wembley and nobody being there, you know, I've seen Newcastle at Wembley just like I've seen other North East clubs at Wembley, but part of it has been that experience of going to Trafalgar Square, filling the stadium, but filling London, getting drunk, going to Covent Garden, reminding yourself of that thing that football is about, which is about community. And that's been taken away. So it's very difficult to sort of put that in, you know, into context and sort of know how it means. It would be the ultimate irony if Newcastle get to Wembley and no one's there to see it, because it's not a club famous for winning things. It's a club famous for not winning things, but fans turning up regardless. And that part of their identity is now gone.
Well, it does promise to be a fascinating conclusion to things at Newcastle off the pitch, if perhaps not on it. But thanks, George and Chris, for joining me, and have a good evening.
Cheers, James.
Okay, we are joined now by Greg O'Keefe, our Everton correspondent. It looks like a lovely evening up there. How are you doing, Greg? You all right?
Not too bad, thanks, James. Yeah, it's all right, you know. Yeah.
Good. I was just thinking, actually, George was talking about the importance of the fans, you know, to Newcastle United. He wrote a brilliant piece this season about travelling away with Newcastle United and what it's like to be a supporter on an away day. If you are an Athletic subscriber, definitely check that one out. And if you're not, take advantage of the offer we've got at the moment and read it, because it is a brilliant piece of writing. When it comes to Everton, Greg, I've got to be honest, I've looked at the fixture list. There is one game that jumps out to me immediately, and it is that derby against Liverpool, which could be absolutely massive, because that could be a game in which Everton needs something to prevent Liverpool winning the league there.
There couldn't be more at stake in so many different ways, and you know, it'll be the third derby of the season, and in the other two they've been notable lows in a very mixed season as it is on the pitch anyway. You know, 5-2 at Anfield more or less sealed Marco Silva's fate last year. And then just when optimism was probably at its peak with Carlo Ancelotti in the new year, the FA Cup third round and Liverpool win. Their kids beat us 1-0. Curtis Jones puts one in the top bin, which was an absolute sickener. So if I'm honest, on the blue half of Merseyside, there's a funny old feeling about football being back. You know, I think we're naturally excited, but you speak to a lot of Evertonians and there's a degree of sort of an eye rolling, a bit of a pessimism, especially if we're going into the prospect of perhaps needing a result in a fixture that Everton haven't won since 2010. If we're needing a result to stop Liverpool winning the title in Everton's backyard, I just think there'll be a lot of people with an eye on when tomorrow night's game cheering on City. That's all I can say on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I imagine so. And do you think when football resumes, Carlo Ancelotti came in at the turn of the year and there was an initial uptick in terms of form and results, certainly. But having had this time away from the game and these couple of weeks with his players in training, do you think we might see something more like the Carlo Ancelotti Everton? Do you think this might look a little bit more like his team now?
Look, I really want to say yeah, but I'm not sure even at that stage yet. From what we can gather at Finch Farm since they've been back, it's been, I mean, you've got to acknowledge that they've been dropping like flies since Everton have actually gone back to training. So Jean-Philippe Gbamin, who we've hardly ever seen, who was supposed to be just coming back to fitness in time to play an important part in the centre of the midfield. Another long-term injury. He's not going to kick a ball for the best part of a year. Fabian Delph's got a niggle, might not play. It looks like Yerry Mina is touch and go for the derby. Theo Walcott, who can always on his day provide a threat, has had surgery since coming back and won't be able to play. So it's they're not going to be the strongest option. And I think for now, until he can put his own mark on this squad in the transfer market, he'll stay with 4-4-2, which was something Duncan Ferguson introduced, but he's had his own shift on it. And I guess the interesting thing about Sunday's game will be, has he evolved that 4-4-2 from what we saw at Stamford Bridge last time out, which I'm sure loads of Blues wouldn't care to dwell upon, but they got a hiding, 4-0, well beaten. The boy Gilmour run riot. It was, a fluid 4-3-3 from Chelsea, and Everton were overrun midfield. And my only concern is Liverpool like to play a bit of a 4-3-3 as well, don't they, with legs and pace and runners everywhere. So we're going to have to see an evolution of what we saw at Stamford Bridge. And, at the same time, it's such a unique fixture for the derby. Bookings are plenty. It hardly ever settles down for the first hour or so. Is it going to be like that with no fans at Goodison Park? Or will it have a sort of strange tempo with half the intensity because still the players are aware of what's at stake? But there'll be definitely something, and I would say in a Merseyside derby, more than in any of the fixture, we'll notice the lack of fans, I'd suggest.
Yeah, that's going to be really fascinating. I mean, it'll certainly be an unusual derby, but a huge one for Everton nonetheless. And we mentioned some of the players there who are out injured or have picked up injuries since the resumption of training. I mean, I guess that just is going to mean that Richarlison is going to become all the more important. Do you think he's the key man, really, between now and the end of the season?
Yeah, I think he's Everton's best player. He's Everton's kind of... Is he yet anywhere close to being, as was suggested in January, a £90 million plus player? I'd say maybe not. But I think he's got the capability to become an elite level player. The links with Barcelona weren't laughable. And I think his age, just 22, and the way he's developing, the variety to his game, he's two-footed, he's fantastic in the air, he's quick, he's resilient. And I know a few people who've watched Everton might laugh when you say resilient because he goes down a lot, but at the same time, he gets a lot of punishments and he gets up eventually after a couple of commando rolls and keeps going. And he's becoming a bit of a talisman for Everton. And I think he could be key. I think he's got a derby moment in him. And I just hope he's saving up for Sunday evening.
Well, Liverpool fans won't like to hear that, but Everton fans certainly will. Thank you so much for joining us, Greg. We're going to move on now to Crystal Palace, but have a good evening.
Thanks, mate.
Okay, we're joined now by Dominic Fifield, who, along with Matt Woosnam, helps cover Crystal Palace in the Premier League. Dom, how are you doing? You having a good evening?
Yeah, not too bad. You're almost there, James. You're doing brilliantly.
It's fun. I'm learning a lot, to be honest, which is good. I'm so focused in Arsenal usually. I really haven't got a clue what's going on in the rest of the Premier League. So this is an education for me. As for Palace, I mean, they're pretty comfortable, aren't they? I mean, they're sort of safely ensconced in mid-table. And if things go right for them, I think they could record a highest ever finish in the Premier League.
Yeah, look, their highest points tally in the Premier League is 49. They've got 39 after 29 games this time round, which is pretty remarkable. But I think there's a certain amount of relief that they won those three fixtures just before lockdown was imposed. When you look at the sort of daunting nature of their running in particular, where they've got a lot of the teams at the top of the division and some that are really struggling against relegation at the moment, be fighting for their lives. They they needed that buffer of the 3 wins in succession, the 1-0s, just to give them a bit of breathing space and allow them to get back into the resumption, with a bit of confidence and a buffer from those in trouble.
Well, I'm delighted to say that Matt Woosnam has also joined us now. How you doing, Matt? Can you hear us all right?
Yeah, good, thanks. You all right?
Yeah, very well, thank you. There was something I wanted to ask you about, Matt, which is something we've not talked about tonight, is the introduction of the 5 substitute rule to the Premier League and the 20-man squads. And Crystal Palace are a team with a fantastic academy, always brought through youth players. They've had many, many off that production line. Who are the young players who you think might benefit from these new rules introduced in the Premier League? Who might get those opportunities?
Yeah, so in the training pictures that Palace have put out recently, there's quite a few young players actually training with the first team in that first team group. One of those is Brandon Pierrick. He made his debut in the FA Cup. Against Norwich, and then in the FA Cup as well. He's sort of inside, in old-fashioned terms, he's a bit of an inside right, so he's kind of not quite a winger, not quite a striker, but plays wide, cuts inside, brings the ball, shoots, etc., etc. He's a very talented prospect. Became the second youngest player to play for Palace in the Premier League. But what's also interesting is Tyreek Mitchell. He's a left back. He had a really strong start to pre-season before an injury to his thigh prevented him from sort of progressing further. He played in pre-season, and there was a lot of comparisons to Aaron Wan-Bissaka. He's quite similar in style. He's sort of quite a tall, gangly, long-legged, quick defender who'll come back and make those last-ditch tackles. So he won't necessarily stop you from trying to get past him, but he'll make those tackles and win the ball and bring the ball forward. So he's quite an attacking fullback as well. But there's certainly high hopes for him. Also, what's quite interesting is there is a striker, first-year scholar. So he's still only his first year into academy football at that level at under 18s. Is John Kamani Gordon. He's in the training pictures as well. So he's been training with the first team. He's a sort of centre forward / striker. He played in a tournament last year for the under-16s where he scored a goal against Barcelona to equalise. They went on to lose in the tournament, but he's certainly another prospect, sort of strong, quick, athletic striker who can play centre forward or out wide. So there's quite a few actual young players that could make the grade, who could actually feature.
It's an incredible production line of talent, such a hotbed of talent, South East London. But Dom, I was having a conversation last week, projecting forward maybe to next season and the transfer window, with an agent talking about, the transfer market's going to be really depressed. There's not going to be that much activity. And they said to me, well, look, one team to keep an eye on potentially is Crystal Palace. They had a bit of a windfall selling Wan-Bissaka, and they're relatively confident they might be able to spend some money in the next window. Do you think that's accurate? And if so, that could be something for Palace fans to be really excited about.
I think there's a project at Palace that they need to revitalise the squad. They need to bring down the average age. They probably need to bring down the average wage as well. So there will be an influx of younger players. We've seen Nathan Ferguson already linked to the club. I think he will join on the 1st of July from West Bromwich Albion. I think they will also look to strengthen in attacking areas. I don't know how much money they'll spend. I think obviously coronavirus and the lockdown has had a massive effect on what money and funds might be available for clubs like Palace, who recorded a profit in their last financial results. But I think they will be active, definitely, and I'd be surprised if they didn't bring in 3 or 4. But they're going to have to be quite shrewd in the market, I think.
Great, fantastic. Well, listen, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us and talking all things Crystal Palace. We've got Carl back now, so we're going to move on. But thanks so much.
All the best.
Cheers. It's not just Carl. I can see that we are also joined by... You're right there, Carl. You're keeping cool?
It's very warm in the suit.
It is very warm. I do regret it. I've got a tissue that I kept here to sort of dab the sweat from my brow, but I thought it's actually a piece of kitchen roll, and I thought I can't possibly do that on a live stream. We are joined, Carl and I, by Daniel Taylor and David Ornstein. How are you both?
Very well, thank you. Yourself?
Very, very good, thanks. And how are you, Daniel?
Oh, good, James. Yeah, very good.
Fantastic. Now, I should just say, if you're just joining us, we are doing the Premier League preview for The Athletic, all 20 teams. And there's a discount code too. If you want to find out more about your Premier League club, If you go to theathletic.com/all20teams, you can get insight from all the guys we've just spoken to, coverage of your teams, not just match pieces, but looking beyond that, finding out about the squad dynamics, you know, the coaching staff, anything you might be interested in. Speaking of coaching staff, Danny, I read your excellent piece about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. This is a really pivotal period for him, isn't it, as Manchester United manager?
Yeah, absolutely. I think his management so far at Manchester United has gone in phases, really. He started off so well after the Paris Saint-Germain game. You know, that was one of the great nights since Fergie left, really, for United. Everyone obviously, you know, rightly assumed that he would be getting the job. I think people were slightly taken aback by the fact that United didn't wait until the end of the season. But obviously since then, things started off really, really badly, I think, in the 8 months after that. And, you know, I do accept, obviously, there were the summer months in that time. You know, only 6 league wins. People always trot out these stats that, you know, they had the worst. He had a worse, inferior record, sorry, to Moyes, Van Gaal, Mourinho. But it was, you know, it was inferior as well to Emery at Arsenal. It was very similar to Pochettino's, except Pochettino at the same time was getting Spurs into the Champions League. So in a way, he's been treated very, very sympathetically so far. He's got the kind of historic backing of United's fans, but I think by his own admission, he wouldn't really have had a sniff of the job, to be fair, if it wasn't for that background. And so he's got to make the most of that goodwill now, because he's got a full squad of players. He's got Rashford back. I mean, the timing of everything, it's kind of worked out in a strange way for United. He's got Pogba to play with Fernandes in midfield, you know, which should be, you know, I think everyone's excited to see that. So really, yeah, I mean, they're in 2 cup competitions and they're 5th, although they would be 6th if Sheffield United win their game in hand. And, you know, I don't want to, it's a bit of a cliche to say no, you know, no more excuses, etc., etc. But really, you know, this is time to see what Solskjaer is really like as a manager.
And what do you think he needs to do, Danny, between now and the end of the season?
Well, I wouldn't go as far as saying he absolutely needs to win a cup. You know, if United finish, say, in the Champions League places and they get to a final and they lose in a penalty shootout, I don't think you can decide whether someone's a good manager or not just because, you know, the other team beat them on a spot kick or something like that. But I think they need to finish the season strongly. I think the bare minimum for United, you know, this is Manchester United, you know, the club of huge ambitions, is the Champions League. So people sort of, you know, saying, oh, you know, would it absolutely, you know, he has to finish in the Champions League places. And really, yeah, try and win a trophy or even 2. You know, again, I repeat, this is Manchester United. It's not a club with small ambitions. If he did do that, then the whole kind of narrative around him changes because the run was so poor between spring when he signed his contract and the end of last year that you know, there are a lot of, when I wrote that piece, it was weird to see how divisive Solskjaer is. A lot of people don't want criticism of him because, you know, he's regarded so affectionately. So a lot of United fans were slightly, you know, I mean, Twitter's Twitter, but slightly kind of outraged that I would dare question him. Whereas at the same time, there's a lot of United fans coming on saying, you know, this guy shouldn't be anywhere near our club, and please bring in Pochettino. And, you know, so there's definitely a split that he could, with a successful 2 months, very much eradicate and just basically, you know, get rid of that whole debate about whether, because we all know he wouldn't have got that job otherwise, or he wouldn't have been put in that position. So this is his chance to really kind of to change the storyline around him, really, and just basically so everyone can see that, yeah, he does actually deserve it, even if there was a bit of luck about how he got it. You know, sometimes people need a bit of luck.
Carl, I want to bring you in here. I mean, what have you made of Solskjaer's tenure at Manchester United thus far?
Well, I'll tell you, in another life, when we were at the Athletic Soccer last season, I wrote a piece just after he was appointed manager. I weighed up the pros and cons, and I said the key thing about Solskjaer wasn't the fact he was the permanent manager, or the fact they gave him a 3-year contract. So it wasn't his job. It's not Solskjaer's job to turn Manchester United into a title contender. It's the job for the next manager. I didn't think he'd be quite the draw on the transfer market, and I thought, you know, that United would eventually level out, which they did. And I say At the start of the season, when Pochettino became available, I was very much a go get Pochettino person, but Bruno has improved things. And yeah, in that sort of bizarre, nostalgic mythology thing, he has sort of reconnected Manchester United with who they once were. And the same way that Zidane perhaps is not the most tactically innovative manager of all time, but seems to get results at Real Madrid, and how Deschamps doesn't seem to be the smartest football manager of all time, but has won a World Cup for France. Sometimes who you are is just as important as what you say in football. And Solskjaer is beginning to make the two things coalesce for United.
And what do you think, Carl? Pogba and Fernandes, I mean, is that combination going to be the key for them?
Be still my beating heart. It's going to be brilliant. I'm so sorry for the third person in that midfield, be it Scott McTominay or Fred or Nemanja Matic, whoever does that. Good luck having to track back and make that space, because those boys just want to go forward at all points in time. I'm looking forward to Marcus Rashford coming back. I think everyone who's joining this stream today can agree that Marcus Rashford is a wonderful boy and needs to be protected at all costs. So him coming back and playing football after the stress factor in his back is going to be a lot of fun. United have a lot to play for. And I'm never, ever going to say United are back, because no. And I'm never going to say United being back is a good thing, because there's literally a devil on the badge, and we've been the bad boys of the Premier League for so long. But yeah, it's all right when they're playing decent, isn't it?
Well, Carl's going to be talking Manchester United later on this evening with Laurie Whitwell. So if you're a United fan, definitely stay tuned for that. David, it's funny, we're talking about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, a coach who was a former player under an iconic manager. And it's a very similar situation in some respects to what Arsenal have got in terms of Mikel Arteta, played under Arsene Wenger. I know this week you've been working on a piece for The Athletic about Mikel Arteta's first 6 months at Arsenal. It's going to be out tomorrow morning. I just want to ask you, what have been your impressions as you've been collating that piece and talking to different people? What kind of impact has Arteta made in that time?
Well, I don't want to give too much of the piece away that you've worked heavily on as well, but and for reference, for anybody watching this, it comes out tomorrow morning. It includes a lot of different voices and a lot of insight from people that has never been revealed before about Arteta's first 6 months. Actually, Arsenal's game against Manchester City tomorrow night falls almost exactly 6 months to the day. I think he was appointed on the 20th of December, and this is going to be on the 17th of June. It's also, of course, against the club that he joined Arsenal from in quite acrimonious circumstances, actually, because, during the course of speaking to people for this piece, it's clear just how unhappy Manchester City were with their perceived their sort of view of Arsenal's approach, and losing someone that they valued as well. And of course, it was Mikel Arteta whose positive diagnosis for coronavirus essentially led to or contributed to the shutdown of football in the Premier League and in other countries as well. What have I learned about him from this piece? Well, he's incredibly clear, and there's no doubting his message. From day one, he came in with a very different approach to Unai Emery. And I don't want to say anything that reflects too badly on Emery, because that's not fair. But one of the benefits of Mikel Arteta was his communication skills, his language. And everybody we've spoken to, almost as one, say that there was almost an overnight change in the messages, the plan, the what they were supposed to be doing. And when new managers come in, you always hear these sort of things, like there's smiles on faces, and I think an element of change brings that at all organisations, or many, and certainly at football clubs. But at Arsenal, suddenly the simple things were the most effective. I don't think Mikel Arteta has tried or had time to reinvent the wheel. Although, talking of wheels, there's a point about a certain wheel within the piece that I'm not going to give too much away, but that's really interesting, a technique that he has brought into the dressing room. But the basics. People had... Things had become confused at Arsenal under Emery. Staff and players didn't really know what they were doing. I think Emery worked so hard and he cared so much that, and he had no background to Arsenal. He had no allies. He knew no players or staff really, and so he sort of overcompensated when actually in these situations, and especially when you've had one man in charge for 22 years, you need to gradually change things with sort of baby steps. Even if fundamental changes are needed, you don't necessarily do them overnight. And I think Arsenal returned to a few of their guiding principles, a bit of their DNA under Mikel Arteta. And then as it went on, he really connected with the players and staff in a way that they were longing for. He rebuilt some relationships, some confidence. There are little techniques within his style of coaching and management that come through in our piece and really help explain why he's been a hit with players and staff. One thing that doesn't guarantee is results. But Arsenal have been certainly on a positive trajectory from what we hear behind the scenes. And I can't wait to see how this pans out, because if it plays out for Arsenal half as well as people there think it will and truly believe it will, then it should be a really good story for us as journalists, especially you and Amy on the Arsenal patch specifically. Yeah, there's so much in there that we talk about, from meetings, which we lift the lid on a little bit, techniques he's used around key incidents like the wage cut deferral talks, the decision of Gary O'Driscoll not to leave Arsenal for Liverpool, and you and Amy on the now.
Don't worry, I think that's the audio back from Amy.
No worries. And yeah, so I think Mikel Arteta has made a magnificent impact on Arsenal. He's impressed many people outside of the club as well. But the key point here is this is not just the loving. He is the first to keep his feet on the ground and say they've done nothing really yet, and half of his reign has been ruined by coronavirus.
Well, listen, we're going to talk more Arsenal shortly. We've got Amy Lawrence about to join us. We're going to go into this second half, or the top half of the Premier League coming up. We've got correspondents from Liverpool, Manchester United, Arsenal, Tottenham, Chelsea. So do stay tuned. Just to remind you, we are doing the Premier League preview tonight for The Athletic. If you want to sign up, if you want to get more of the kind of insight you've heard from Danny, from David, there is a discount code, theathletic.com/all20teams. Carl, I'm going to hand over to you and you take it home from here.
Here we go. Top half of the Premier League, which is where Arsenal is. Hooray. So, a lot of draws, 3 managers, and not much else to make that sense of Arsenal here. James, Amy, help me make sense of what's going on. Arsenal did release a really nice video on Twitter just now with Ian Wright just sort of saying football's back and you can't wait. Can Arsenal fans wait?
I'll let you take that one, Amy.
Right, okay. Hi, just having massive technical breakdown here, so forgive me while I realise I'm actually trying to do this thing. Are people excited? Gosh, have people missed it? I guess so. But I think there's so much uncertainty about Arsenal still. There's an awareness, I think, that Mikel Arteta has come in and done a job that really is quite massive. And to be in your first job, a few games in, and suddenly you are the man who gets coronavirus and halts the Premier League season. And we've had this opportunity to, I guess he's had to try and coach remotely. He's had to try and get to know his players better remotely. And he said in his press conference something that I thought struck a chord yesterday when he was talking about how when he's coaching, he misses sort of touching the players. I think he's quite a guy who likes to move his players around on the training pitch and work with them. And he's got so much to do to get them playing the way he wants to play, that I think you look at what's ahead for Arsenal, you think anything could happen in these remaining games. They've got some clear objectives, getting back into Europe, trying to win the FA Cup. But it could maybe, if it doesn't go so well, lead to a bit of mediocrity. And this is a fascinating challenge for Arteta, because I think he's juggling 2 balls, one of which is now these next few games. Can he manage some tangible success for the team? And on the other hand, at the same time, he's got to be looking slightly longer term. which of these players can I trust for next season? Where can I make those bigger improvements? Because he's picked up a nightmare, really, and had to run with it and done pretty well, things considered. But I think he wants much, much more.
James, let me get your thoughts here. It's been described as sort of a quiet revolution at Arsenal. Can we expect some sort of stylistic changes to how Arsenal play when we come back to football?
I think so. I mean, when Mikel took over, the focus really was on getting back to basics. I mean, maybe it is a quiet revolution because prior to Mikel taking over, I mean, it was chaos. The style of football was pretty chaotic too. It was end-to-end stuff. You think back to Arsenal's game at Vicarage Road, they drew 2-2. I think Watford had something like 30 attempts on goal. It was a basketball game, as Mourinho would probably term it. And under Arteta, Arsenal played in a lot more structured style. And there has been a bit of a sacrifice there. They haven't necessarily been as adventurous going forward as you might envisage an Arteta team being. You know, you think of him working alongside Guardiola, the sort of relentless attacking force they became. Arsenal are nowhere near that. In fact, the first thing they've done is improve the defending. And you look at a player like David Luiz, who was really kind of as dreadful as any Arsenal fan might have feared under Emery. Under Arteta, he's a player transformed. He's a leader. You know, he's cajoling the young players. He's a bit of a figurehead for the side, and he looks composed. He looks comfortable in possession. He looks a different player. And I think there are others that applies to as well. Granit Xhaka is a great example. I mean, in November, he was being booed off the pitch by his own fans, you know, stripped of the captaincy. And under Arteta, he appeared to be headed out in the January transfer window. Arteta's talked him round. He's staying now. He's talking about having a long-term future here, being part of the plan. He shares Arteta's vision for the number 6 role in the midfield. And he's not the only one. You think of people like Mustafi. Players have come in from the cold and been given a second chance, been given a clean slate. And for the most part, they seem to be taking it. I think David mentioned that there needs to be a note of caution here. And I think that's right. I mean, Arsenal are super early on in this project. And I think they're probably going to be rocky times ahead. There are some big contractual negotiations coming up with Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, with Bukayo Saka. They've got decisions to make on the likes of David Luiz, who's due to expire at the end of this season. And given the sort of financial landscape, some of the economic problems, I think that's going to have a big impact on Arsenal. I mean, they've got a very big problem on the horizon tomorrow night when they play Manchester City. And what a big game that is for Mikel Arteta. I mean, he'll say all the right things about, you know, I just want to play it like any other game. But I know this will mean an enormous amount to him to go up against his former mentor, his former boss in Guardiola. And there have been a few occasions recently where Arsenal have gone to the Etihad and not necessarily put up the best fight. There have been some decent performances there, but also some really disappointing ones. I don't think it's necessarily realistic to think Arsenal are going to go there and, you know, take 3 points away from Man City. But if they can be competitive in that game, I think that will give Arteta a lot of encouragement. And I think it will give the fans plenty of encouragement too.
I spent most of my formative years supporting a hated rival of Arsenal, but I must admit the Premier League is just a little bit better when Arsenal's stronger. I've got one final stat for you. James, you may have noticed I went dead dark during the call because you did mention earlier it's your 34th birthday. So
it is. I'm afraid so, yeah.
Ran off and I've conjured you a cake.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
Through the magic of Zoom entertainment.
It's incredible, but sadly not edible.
Oh, yeah, and I can't even light the candle. But yeah, there's a cake for you that I'm going to enjoy myself for breakfast. Other than that, thank you, Amy. Thank you, James. I hope you have a decent Wednesday when Premier comes back. And now I get to welcome Mr. Andy Jones.
Hello.
Hello,
It's great to be here for that
Andy.
presentation of the cake. I enjoyed that.
How are you doing, my friend? Right, Andy, I'm going to be really, really honest with you. Every time I look at the Premier League table or look at any sort of Premier League stat, Burnley are there and I go, what? How is this happening? So, Burnley are 10th. How?
Basically, as simplistic as it sounds, they know how to win games. And the type of games where they're not easiest on the eye, necessarily, and that's what teams, but they know how to nick a goal, they know how to get. Dice talks a lot about detail and fine margins in football matches, and he and his team represent that. They find the little, you know, the bounce of the ball, the second balls, they get there, and that makes the difference in those types of games because, you know, Burnley haven't got the greatest players in the world, and that's an obvious fact. But they, as a group, when they are all at it, all working hard and all 100%, that pays off, and it's seen by the results and how they've been able to consistently overachieve in the Premier League.
Right. So Sean Dyche is also the reigning Premier League Manager of the Month. How has he done that as well? So it's this sort of thing where we've got quite a few teams right now who want to play a high pressing game, who want to play this sort of intricate passing possession football. They've had 3 months of exercise bikes are helpful, but it's not the same as match fitness. A lot of people are thinking Burnley might shoot up the table because they're going to just ping it long. Could it be that simple? They
mix it up. They don't always go long. It's key to stress long passes, not long balls. But they one of the things that will work in Burnley's favour is they are renowned for being very, very fit. The fitness is very, very key to the way they play because they're not on the ball they're not. Usually they haven't got the share of possession in the game, so they do a lot of work, and especially the midfield too of Ashley Westwood and Jack Cork, they're very, very important to the system. But I think fitness will play a part. And you mentioned Dyche is reigning Premier League Manager Month. I think he's won it in February, so he's probably the longest ever holder of it, of that award, which I'm sure he'll be delighted about. But they did that through, it was a 7-game unbeaten run, and that was, the middle part of it, and picked up good wins away at Southampton and a home to Bournemouth, and there were draws against Arsenal and Newcastle as well. And essentially, around Christmas, they were struggling for a bit of their identity. They'd lost the way a little bit, but the way organised the team, they were back to the intensity, the usual, the high press when it's applicable, and working hard off the ball, and then when they get it, using the ball effectively in the right areas, and it served them well, and was why they were on such a good run of form going into the break.
It was a good run of form. Can they continue it? Can we see Burnley back in Europa?
Well, optimistically, yeah. Manchester City away is not the nicest start. I think that's fair to say. But they've got to play 5 of the bottom 6. So while they will, have their own things to play for, Burnley themselves have put themselves in a really good position, and Wolves from Sheffield United have both got to come to turf more. So there's opportunities there to take points off the teams that are just above them. They're only 6 points off 5th, so why not? They've done it before. So you've got to be optimistic about it, and the form that they were in, and the confidence was sky high. And there's no reason why that will drop off. Manchester City away is obviously not the best of starts, but at the same time, the confidence they've got, they go into every game. They were going into every game, with the confidence that they could at least get a result and win the game, because they beat a couple of really tough teams and places where they're tough to get results.
Andy, thank you so much for joining me.
No,
Burnley are going to be in the Europa League. You heard it here first.
I didn't quite say that.
No, I said that. I'm just talking about the time they drew 1-1 with Spurs and probably should have battered them. Speaking of Spurs, hello, gentlemen. I've got Jack Pickbrook and Charles Chi here. How are we doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm enjoying your background, Jack. Thank you very much.
Thanks. My fiance says that I need a background when I do Zoom so that people can't see how messy our flat is.
I just keep moving.
That is a bit of a cheat, though. Like, you're getting an insight into all of our lives, but we can't see yours, Jack.
But all I can see behind you, Charlie, is clean walls.
Yeah, true. I found like a rare clean spot.
Gentlemen, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to distract me so we don't talk about how bad Spurs were before the break, but we need to discuss it. Spurs were bad before the COVID-19 break, weren't they not?
This is Mourinho distraction techniques.
Yeah, so right through you.
Yeah, they were terrible. They didn't win in the last 6 before lockdown. They could barely get a team out, it felt like at times. They had so many strikers and attacking players missing. Yeah, it was pretty grim, actually, those last sort of 6 games. So for them, the break, and, with it, they've got 4 really important players back from injury. It came at a pretty good time for them.
Mourinho said he wanted to fast forward to the end of the season. Now, it looks like as if he's been presented with maybe the best chance to get Spurs back into the Champions League spot and sort of establish his new era at Spurs. Jack, what can we expect for their game against Manchester United?
Well, it's a really good question. I think the first thing we can expect is the best players will be playing, which wasn't the case a few months ago. Like Sissoko and Kane got injured in the same game at Southampton on New Year's Day and hadn't been seen since. Obviously, Son broke his arm. Bergwijn, who started well, got injured. So all those guys will be back. And I'm quite optimistic. I think, I don't know whether it's to do with Charlie and Alex and all the kind of the Spurs fans we work with every day, but I feel like I've been pulled in towards this kind of Mourinho optimism. I think I can see them pulling it off.
One more win, and then you're just off 5th place. Everyone's back. One thing we want to discuss, I really want to discuss, is Ndombele. So sort of false dawn, and then during lockdown got made to run around the park.
Yeah, he's given us a lot to write about this season. Very, fascinating player. I mean, so much talent there. We had a kind of deep look. You'd have enjoyed this, Carl. Tom Werville and I kind of did a deep dive, so to speak, on his output and that kind of thing. And clearly, there is such a talented player there, and stylistically quite similar to Dembele, who Spurs have missed from the moment he got injured just before he left. Huge couple of months for him, as it is for so many players. I mean, if he hits the heights, then that is such a huge bonus for Tottenham, because up till now he's shown flashes, but he's really played for more, under Mourinho certainly, more than like an hour in a game. So the upside is just so huge. So yeah, very, very intrigued to see how he does.
No Delhi for the first game. He'll be serving 1 game suspension. So how can we expect this sort of Mourinho football? Spurs used to be a pressing team under Pochettino. Mourinho isn't really a fan of pressing. Do you think that sort of style of football is sustainable if you want to play in the Champions League in England?
I think Mourinho's football can work. I don't think you have to play like a kind of Klopp, Guardiola style football to succeed. Obviously, it's not worked yet, but I think that's kind of due to circumstances. I'm hoping that the absence of Delhi in the first game might mean they go to us. I'd like to see them play like England do. There's the kind of 4-3-3 with Kane sitting a little bit deeper, threading those through balls through to runners in front of him. Ideally, Son and I think Bergwijn. Like, I'm sorry, Lucas, but I think if you've got Bergwijn and Son running on ahead of Kane, that is a really, really exciting front three. And alternatively, if they do want to go the 4-2-3-1, I'd push Ndombele further forward. If Lo Celso isn't fit, I'd like to see, maybe they could give Ndombele a more advanced role in the team. So, look, they've got the attacking players to do it. I don't think the whole team necessarily holds together, but they've definitely got the talent.
Charlie, your thoughts? Spurs versus United, an angry Rashford, an angry Pogba coming to the new Tottenham Hotspur Stadium for the very first time.
Yeah, it's a lot to look forward to. But yeah, we were talking about this. I mean, Delhi being out is obviously a blow for Spurs because they lose a real goal threat. But it does potentially simplify things a little bit, because I think for that game as well, I mean, we saw at Old Trafford back in December when these two sides played and Mourinho went with the 4-2-3-1. On that night, it was Lucas Moura. And they just got bypassed in midfield, really. It was Fred and McTominay, and they just absolutely bossed them. So I think it does kind of make sense to go to that 4-3-3 anyway. And that makes more sense almost when Delhi's not there. So I think a lot depends on Lo Celso being fit as well. But I think Spurs can absorb that. But then maybe it's how do they then change the game if things aren't working. But it's going to be really exciting. But they've got such a better chance than they would have done if this game had been played when it was meant to be. And at that time, it felt like they were on the ropes. They just lost at Leipzig. The players were dropping like flies, and it just felt like it was waiting for United to deliver that knockout blow. Whereas now, I agree with Jack. I think they've got a real chance on Friday.
Second wind. It's going to be very exciting. Gentlemen, I wish you well. There's also a North London derby for you in the future as well. And we'll talk to you about that in due time. Hello, listeners. If you are coming to us via Twitter, I just want to say it's The Athletic, and we're sort of doing where all the big boys play now. We care about your team, all 20 teams in the Premier League now. I'm talking to every single expert we can find about their clubs. I'm joined by Richard Sutcliffe. We call him Sooty. He's the Sheffield United expert. You can find some of his writing on The Athletic, as well as all of our writers, including Jack, Charlie, Andy, and more on The Athletic. You can get 40% off your subscription right now by going to theathletic.com/all20teams. Right, Richard, Sheffield United. There's been a break in football. It's been over 100 days, and I think I've learned what the overlapping centre-backs do.
you've used your time wisely then. I like that.
Yes, it was really hard, but I think I got there. I'm going to switch a little light on now. What's the general vibe in Sheffield United?
Oh, just optimism, confidence, and hope. I think really it's obviously Sheffield United have never ever qualified for Europe, be that Champions League, even in the Intertoto Cup Winners' Cup. They've never actually got there, but there's a real chance they could do it now, and you can just sense the excitement around the city that this might be their year.
It's a interesting fixture list coming forward. It can always be quite hard when it's still weird to think of Sheffield United as a newly promoted team because they're sort of flying so high in the table, but they still are. Aston Villa first up. How do you think they're going to approach that game?
Just like they have all season, really. It's one to really. I spoke to Billy Sharp on Monday, and he said it's one to really lay down a marker. That's the real hope. If they can go into that game, get the 3 points, they're up to 5th, just 2 points shy with everyone else in terms of games, and it's just a straight sprint for the line. They'll be positive. Obviously, the defensive record is what their form's been built on this season, but they do like to attack teams. They do like to get it wide, and they do like to get those crosses in for the likes of Billy Sharp, McBurney, Lys Mousset. You know, there's goals in that team if they can get the delivery right.
There really is. There's been a number of contract extensions as well, if I've been paying attention to enough social media.
You have, yeah. They've done well, actually. They put everything on hold when lockdown started because Wilder didn't think it was a very good look to be giving people new contracts and extensions when what was going on. But since the football started reopening this week, they've just done Billy Sharp, David McGoldrick and Oliver Norwood, which is a big one. And it's, you know, they're keeping together a group that have just come so far together in such a short space of time. And it gives, you know, that bit of stability to the players, but it shows that they're wanted as well. And it shows that if Sheffield United do get into Europe next season, then these guys are going to be part of it.
One person who might not be part of it, unfortunately, is the goalkeeper, Dean Henderson. I'm going to hide my Manchester United paraphernalia as I ask you this question. He's in the middle of a bit of a tug of war. What's the current approach there?
Yeah, well, they've secured him until the end of the season, which is a big thing. Obviously, some clubs could have turned around and said, well, you're actually, strangely enough, as daft as it might sound to some people, Manchester United and Sheffield United are rivals for the top 4. They could have turned around and said, well, why should we hand you an advantage by letting Dean stay for the season? Because there's no doubt he makes a big difference. But Chris Wilder spoke to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer over the weekend, and he says, no, not a problem at all. And he says Ole's a decent man as well. So he says, no, he started the season there, he'll finish the season there. Obviously, he can't play against Manchester United a week on Wednesday. So Simon Moore will probably come into the side. But the difference he makes to that team is phenomenal. And he's been a big factor in why they just conceded so few goals.
One for the FPL managers to keep with as well. Sky's the limit for Sheffield United. Genuinely. It's amazing, isn't it?
Absolutely. They were written off left, right and centre by everybody back in the summer, and we expected that, you know, a newly promoted side, that's always going to happen. But they've just kept, you know, they've ignored that and just kept going. And there's no pressure on them. Obviously, there's a lot of clubs, you know, I've listened to you throughout the evening and James, and, you know, people saying there's pressure financially for some of these clubs to get into Europe, but that's not the case for Sheffield United. Obviously, any income's welcome, especially what's been going on for the last 3 months and the troubles we're going to have going forward for football. But there's no pressure. Nobody expected them to be 7th in the league and could go 5th if they win the game in hand. So, you know, as much as you can do in the Premier League when all eyes are on you tomorrow, because, you know, it's Chris Wilder said it, and he's probably right, that it's probably the biggest audience that Sheffield United will have had in their history because everyone loves the Premier League around the world. So all eyes are going to be on that first game. So, but there's no pressure on them. They can just go out, play their own game, and hopefully, from a Sheffield United perspective, they keep their heads while other people, maybe the pressure gets to them.
The truest have-a-go team we got in the league. I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
Right, I think I'm being connected to Mr. Tim Spears, the man who knows everything about Wolves. He's got a lovely little dartboard behind him. How has your dart game been progressing during lockdown, my friend?
It's got a lot stronger during the last 3 months, mate, I've got to say. Nothing else to do, right? In fact, looking at the video, I think I need to create a social bubble with my barber by the look at it, mate. But yeah, everything's good, pal. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm doing really well. Wolves, right, you're 6th place. You're in the Europa League. You're ticking along. You've got one of the most interesting players in all of Europe. We should just wrap it up and go, well done. See you soon.
Decent, yeah. It's been a phenomenal 3 years, and it sort of shows no sign of slowing down, really. You know, lockdown really got in the way. But it also kind of came at a good time in a weird way because they'd stuttered a little bit with their attack. But in general, I mean, unbelievable times. They haven't finished 5th since the early 70s, haven't reached the European final since the early 70s. So, You know, that's what they're aiming for. So we're going back almost 50 years here since they're doing what they're doing now. And there's a real confidence, you know, in the whole club and amongst the fan base that they're on the verge of something really special, which they are. And if they can go kind of full pelt for the next 2 months, then who knows what they can do.
West Ham, Bournemouth and Villa in your first 3 games. 9 points?
Well, I'm going to hit you with a stat now. So their next 6 games, since they got promoted to the Premier League at the start of last season, they're actually unbeaten against those teams that they're playing, which is 14 games, I think, in total. So they'll fancy their chances. They've got a really good run in. They've played Liverpool, Man City twice, Spurs twice, Man United twice, Leicester twice. So, yeah, now they've got everyone back fit. Hopefully Traore will be okay because he had an injury problem before lockdown. But yeah, like I said, there's such confidence that they can really do something special here.
Another team for the FPL experts. I do want to talk about Traore because he is a player I've missed so much during lockdown, especially his Instagram posts where he's just sort of inventing new muscles in the triceps and quadricep area. You mentioned he was injured. What's the current state right there?
Well, his shoulder kept popping out. It sounds horrendous, but it just kept dislocating. I think it happened 3 times in 3 months. And Traore, he's a bit of a Terminator type, so you kind of expect his arm just to drop off and like regenerate, right? But in reality, you know, hopefully 3 months has helped that heal because, as everyone knows, he's such a key player. And yeah, since January onwards, with that shoulder problem, he wasn't quite himself. And Wolves had 3 0-0s in 5 games just before lockdown. So if him and Podence and Neto can back up Jota and Jimenez, then I've got no problem with the defence. They've got a really solid, consistent defence, very effective midfield, and if they can bang in the goals, then very few weaknesses.
There's also the small case of the Europa League you have to contend with. So current plans, I think, well, as far as I heard, current plans, possibly a sort of single elimination tournament held on the continent in August. If that's the case, Wolves could possibly go down in history as having the longest Premier League season.
I think it's going that way
anyway.
The
longest season of all time.
Yeah, they started last July. They're going to finish possibly late August with the Europa. So yeah, we're talking 13 months here. It's been a slog for all of us, Carl. You know, but it's been a real adventure. And yeah, the Europa League, as you mentioned, I mean, they played 15 games already in the Europa League. And normally when that happens to clubs outside the Big Six, you know, you expect a dip in the league form. And I think everybody would have taken top half if they'd gone deep in the Europa League, which now they are. But they're on course to finish higher than they did last season, which, you know, this team just never ceases to amaze me. Every single year they surpass my expectations. And the Europa League, there's nothing to fear. You know, the teams that they've played so far, I would say they're kind of akin to lower mid-table Premier League at best, really. And the draws opened up for them. And yeah, if it's like a 1 week shootout from the quarters onwards, I mean, it'll be exciting. It's anyone's tournament. And Wolves can beat anyone on their day. You know, they've beaten all the big teams in England over the last 2 years in the FA Cup or the league, beaten everybody. So they'll really fancy their chances. And honestly, they're just fearless. They're fearless in every single game they play.
They're truly one of the most tactically fluid teams I've seen. I've seen them play counter-attack. I've seen them play possession. I've seen them play in the same game. I've seen them go from a 4-3-3 to a 3-4-2-1 and a 3-4-1-2. That's too many numbers. But yeah, Wolves, dangerous. I can't wait.
Yeah, it's been a great season. It's been a bit weird that they're the worst first half team in the Premier League by 4 points. They're terrible in the first half, but they've got 21 points from losing positions, more than anyone. They're so exciting to watch. And yeah, like a lot of these players are coming to their prime. They're all absolutely loving it. And the fans, as you can imagine, are just on cloud 9 week after week, mate. So yeah, they more than any other team were desperate for lockdown to stop and come back, and now it's on their way. They can't wait.
Great. I'm just about to welcome Laurie Whitwell here because every time I check the calendar, Wolves are playing Manchester United. So obviously we're going to have you guys back to back. Tim, it's been a pleasure. Yeah, Wolves, Europa League. Why not?
Yeah, well.
Here he is. It's Laurie Whitwell.
How you doing?
I'm doing very well, my friend.
I was on delay. How you doing?
He's on tape delay. It does feel like Eurovision stream now. Listeners, if you're just joining us, we're previewing all 20 Premier League teams. And this is Laurie Whitwell. He's going to talk to me about Manchester United. Together, Laurie and I have a podcast called Talk of the Devils, and this morning we recorded our new episode where we basically just said Marcus Rashford is a lovely boy, didn't we?
It's been incredible, really. I mean, you look at the way that footballers can use their social media influence, and he's obviously got a good following, but to do it in the way that he's done it, to use it for means that are going to help 1.3 million children who perhaps would go hungry during the summer is quite remarkable, really. I mean, I don't think I've ever known a footballer be able to change government policy, ever, let alone in the space of sort of 48 hours. And the way, the eloquence that he speaks with, the compassion that he speaks with, the articulacy that he speaks with, are just all extremely admirable, commendable. And I do think it has an influence on his football, because if you have that kind of drive and commitment and leadership off the pitch, you can certainly take it onto the pitch, and obstacles are there to be overcome.
Absolutely. Had a stress factor in his back and looked as if he'd miss the entirety of the season. Does he look like to play against Spurs this week?
I think he'll start, yeah. I mean, by all accounts, he was excellent against West Brom. I know that United released a few clips of highlights from those friendly games, and some of the skills, I don't know, I guess you saw the kind of drag back pirouette that he did to get past a player in the box was one of them. And obviously we've seen this season, I mean, his Elastico against flip-flap, whichever one you want to call it, against Brighton was a moment in the stadium that everyone was kind of like, gulping at for quite a while. So I think he looks good, and I think because he's such an important player for United, I do think Solskjaer will start him. That's just a personal opinion. And I'm really excited because he when he got the injury, he was in such fine form, wasn't he? I mean, he was scoring goals, he was creating, he was really driving the team on. So hopefully he can come back and do the same thing.
This is a very interesting time for Manchester United. We just had Daniel Taylor earlier on the stream saying it's squeaky bum time for Solskjaer, and it's now or never, and he has to prove himself as the main man. What are your thoughts of Solskjaer right now? How is he feeling going into this run of games? He's got league, he's still in the FA Cup, and he's got the Europa League as well. A lot of games, a lot of chance to prove himself, and a lot of times where things can go wrong. You're
absolutely right. It can be a knife edge. Although United left off with 11 games unbeaten, it was a really great run, 29 goals, 15 different goal scorers. It was a real collection of impressive performances. And I totally take what Danny says. I was listening earlier, and I get exactly that Solskjaer's reign as permanent manager hasn't really always been a bed of roses. Certainly, even when you think back to when they last played Spurs United, it was on an edge. Solskjaer's position, it was difficult. So, but I think the broader picture is he's doing a lot of good work. So the younger players that he's bringing through, the players that he's got rid of, you can see where the team's going. So I hope that the end of the season continues as where they left off, because I do think something could be building at United. But as you say, you could finish the season FA Cup winners, Europa League winners, and everybody's happy. Equally, they could get knocked out of both competitions and not finish in the top four, and it's a disaster. So it really is going to be an intriguing finish to the season.
I keep threading this, talking about FPL. Mm-hmm. And Laurie, I know you've played it a couple of times, and I've prodded you 2 or 3 times on a Thursday going, is Martial fit? Is this one fit? Is this one fit? What's the injury status with everyone at United? Everyone is fit now.
Yeah, I think so. I think Phil Jones missed the intra-club friendly with a bit of an injury. I don't think it's not a major one, so it could be fine to come. But yes, Solskjaer's got a full squad, I think, to select from. Obviously, we'll find out for certain, but I'm not hearing that anybody's got any injuries. We've seen that they look in pretty good spirits.
A full-strength Manchester United team that's playing for everything, really. It's frightening. Listener, if you're joining us on Twitter, you can find Laurie and I on Talk of the Devils podcast. A new episode goes live on Wednesday. Laurie, I'm going to say goodbye to you and also say that's a wonderful bouffant of hair. Keep that.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? I had to actually shift the laptop to get the full quiff. It definitely needs a shave. And I was actually wearing just a black T-shirt before, and then I saw what you were wearing, what James was wearing. I thought I need to actually step it up a little bit and wear one of my snazzy shirts that I've not been able to wear for a long time.
You flatter me. I called you the man from the plan. Well, I called you the man with a plan this morning, and I'm going to continue. But now I'm going to segue to Liam. Liam, hello. You're the Chelsea man.
Carl.
We're almost there. We're almost there. It's the Champions League spaces. This is where the big boys play. Right, Liam. Chelsea were meant to have a transfer ban. How comes you're just throwing money left, right, and centre now?
That's so 2019, mate. Where have you been? I mean,
yeah, you could have been forgiven for thinking that it's been longer than one window because they sat out January. They had the choice to go and spend. They decided to keep their powder dry. And I think you've seen a pretty emphatic vindication of that strategy. You know, they moved aggressively to get Hakeem Ziyech about a week after January closed, got that deal done early. And even after the pandemic, I think the price they did that deal at still holds up as reasonable value. And now, of course, they've moved quicker than everyone else for Timo Werner and got legitimately one of the best goal scorers in all of Europe. So it's a very strong transfer window for Chelsea, and it's not even opened yet.
Ridiculous. The last time you played Premier League football, I'm pretty sure you tore Everton to shreds in a 4-0 victory. Chelsea, something of the Premier League's great entertainers now.
They certainly can be under Lampard. The issue has occasionally been, particularly at Stamford Bridge, breaking down teams that sit deep. I mean, Everton didn't really try and do that. They kind of played into Chelsea's hands. And, of course, the mercurial Billy Gilmour tore them to pieces. But I think, that's what Lampard's tried to address in the transfer market. It will still be a bit of an issue for the rest of this season. Although you could maybe argue that playing without fans could actually help Chelsea at home because they're the 8th best team in the league at home and the 3rd best away. And they've struggled a lot when they start hearing those exasperated groans from the stands. So I think that could certainly help them. More importantly, having Tammy Abraham fully fit helps them again. He's just one of a couple of players that have had time to shake off some injuries, and Mason Mount had a couple of ankle knocks. Of course, N'Golo Kante as well is finally back and ready to contribute. And just as well, because they've got some big games in this run-in.
There is one other player I always half remember. Oh yeah, he's really, really good. Ruben Loftus-Cheek. What's his injury status? Might he play some Premier League football?
Yeah, I mean, he was fit before the shutdown. He wasn't match sharp, but he was fully fit. Chelsea were just being ultra cautious with him, and I think he was really, really raring to go. And then football got cancelled. The guy can't get any luck. But bizarrely, I think actually this shutdown might be the first stroke of good fortune he's had in quite a long time, because it's almost acted as a leveller for the rest of the squad. Everyone is at the same level now, by and large, of physical preparation and sharpness. And I think that gives him more of a chance to feature right off the bat in what remains of these games. And he has featured fairly extensively in the friendlies that Chelsea have played at Cobham and at Stamford Bridge. So I would expect him to at least feature against Villa and City, I think, if not maybe start immediately.
Chelsea have sort of one of the more well-stocked teams in the Premier League. They also have a run-in that's, I'm pulling a face here. There's City, there's Leicester. How do you run the form book in your little stats book?
Well, the form's so hard to predict because, I think sporting integrity is already out the window after this unscheduled stoppage that we've had. But the worrying thing about Chelsea's run-in is that they've got a lot of teams that at one end or the other still have something to play for. And of course, City and Liverpool kind of headline that. Leicester were wobbling a little bit before the shutdown, but now they've got Jamie Vardy fit again. So that's not going to be easy. And of course, Chelsea's still in the FA Cup as well. So it's going to be tricky. But I think they've shown a very wide range of performance this year. When they're good, they're good enough to beat pretty much anyone in the league, or at least compete with them. But when they're bad, they can lose to anyone as well. So I think they've got the most to lose out of any in the top 10 from resuming the season, because they are the team in 4th. But equally, I think they'll go into it reasonably confident that they can hang on, particularly with the size of the squad they've got.
One thing I'm also looking forward to is the return of the Frank Lampard press conference. Listeners, if you are familiar with Adam Hurrey, you'll know the exact cadence of a Frank Lampard conference. Just joke, no, but seriously. Anyway, so Liam, I'll say you've been the delight, but no, seriously, let me get to Rob Tanner. Hi, Rob.
How you doing, Carl?
How are you? Look at you. You're the big gate crasher in the Champions League spaces.
I know. This is what it's all about. Champions League. This was the last Champions League ball when Leicester City were in there 16-17, and they got a great chance of doing it all again. Hopefully they will. So it's going to be a really intriguing 9 games to go. So much to talk about, so much to look forward to as well. I'm really excited for it.
Leicester had a really, really strong start to the season. So they were shooting really, really confident shots, vastly performing XG, and then it all sort of slowed down a bit. Is it simply Wilfred Ndidi got hurt?
No, I think there was a multiple of factors. I think partly because the intensity at which they play, I think fatigue was always going to set in at some stage for a lot of these young lads as well. This is all a new experience. It's a learning curve for them. Brendan's coming in now. It's his first full season with Brendan. But I think Wilfie's a big factor as well. They didn't win any of their games where he was missing through injury. So that sort of highlighted how important he's become to that team. I mean, they have got some promising young players in Hamza Chowdhury and that they've stepped in the breach. But Wilfred he's a different gravy at the moment. He's quality. And, he's been a big miss, but he's fully fit now. He's had a rest, as we all have had for 3 months. So he'll come back firing. And, we're looking forward to it now.
There are so many things this Leicester team can achieve. Like you said, still in the FA Cup, Jamie Vardy will probably want to add to his goal tally and win that golden boot as well, and this league position as well. Leicester City in the Champions League, I mean, that completely changes everything in English football.
Exactly. I mean, when they won the title in 2016 and then they had that fantastic run to the quarterfinals of the Champions League a year later, you never thought it would get any better than that. But there's a real optimism around Leicester City that one day it may repeat itself. They might have more success. Champions League qualification opens the doors for so many other possibilities as well, not just the financial rewards for that, but in terms of the experience for the club as well moving forwards. And winning becomes a habit, and if they can keep being in and out around the top sides in the Premier League, they aspire to be rubbing shoulders with them on a regular basis, and that's going to be very difficult because of the financial constraints of the club. They've still got a long, long way to go to match the likes of Man United financially off the pitch and their reach. But there's real ambition there, and that gives a lot of optimism to the supporters.
One ambition or ambitious player where Leicester sort of outpunched the traditional Big Six was Yuri Tielemans. I know you had an interview with him recently. Yeah. I adore that player because I played with him far too much in FIFA, I want to say 17. What's Mr. Tielemans like?
Very calm. So excuse the storm outside. Obviously we've had a bit of quiet for 3 months. Now we've got a storm because even God's excited about football coming back. But no, Tielemans has been fantastic. He was probably the best form was when he was on loan last season. This season is his first season in the Premier League, getting used to the demand. So he's been a little bit inconsistent, as many of the youngsters have been. But you've seen his quality on the ball. He's a thinker as well. He's a cerebral footballer. And he floats through games. Sometimes it looks like he's not really involved, but he is an influence on the pitch. And he's one of the leaders of the dressing room now as well. And really? Brendan has said that he sees him going into management when he finishes playing. So he's a very intelligent footballer. He thinks about what he does on the pitch. So I think there's more to come from him as well.
More to come from everyone at Leicester. You've also got an impressive back line. You've got James Maddison, who is just, they've called him so many nicknames: Baggio, the D squared, Deco. I quite like his very silver backpack as he runs around the place as well.
Yeah.
I described you as a gate crasher when you just joined the stream. Are Leicester here to stay in the Champions League places?
That's the ambition. That is the ambition. I mean, they've got some really important games, certainly towards the end of the 9-game run. Now, just looking very quickly at the fixtures, you've got the likes of Man United, who are very much in the hunt. You've got Tottenham, you've got Arsenal, Sheffield United as well in those final 5 games. So it's going to get if Leicester get off to a good start, and obviously we don't know what's going to happen now because it feels like a brand new season, doesn't it? They've had 3 months away. Teams that had momentum have lost momentum. Teams that were struggling have had a breather. So it's really hard to predict. But if they can get off to a good start, coming towards those final 5 games, they've got a great chance.
I wish you all the best, my friend. Football's back. Yeah. Isn't this really, really, really exciting?
Oh, exactly. I mean, just watching this tonight and listening to all the guys as well, getting my juices flowing.
It's exciting for everyone, apart from maybe the chap who's just joined us now. It's Sam. Hi, Sam. How you doing?
Right. I'm all right. How's it going?
So, City.
Yeah. The other City. You got to clarify which one.
Manchester City. Okay, yeah. So you got your decent position in the league. Can't win the Premier League. Still in the Champions League, and European appeal. So, what's the story here?
Well, I was speaking to someone at the weekend for the Juan Mar Leo piece, which you can read,
on The Athletic. I was speaking to someone at the weekend and they said, oh yeah, as Cheeky says, there's 3 targets. And I was like, what do you mean, Cheeky says? It was, so apparently just around the club, this is what they're saying. 3 targets, beat Newcastle and in the FA Cup and go on and reach the final. Beat Real Madrid in the Champions League and go on and try and reach the final, win it. And beat Liverpool and at least finish second, but also say to Liverpool, look, we're not gone away yet, kind of mark their card for next season. So apparently at the club, that's what they're aiming for.
There it is. Premier League 2, Too Fast, Too Furious, or Premier League 2, Electric Boogaloo, depending on your filming knowledge. I want to talk about Kevin De Bruyne. We seem to do this like every other season where an attacking midfielder gets close and, might they finally break the assist record? Can it finally happen? Can Kevin De Bruyne break Thierry Henry's assist record? And 2, does it count after a 3-month break?
I mean, it does count, but everything this season is going to be, oh yeah, they did that, whether it's winning it or getting relegated or getting into Europa League or whatever it's going to be. Yeah, there was that, but kind of in back of people's minds, everyone's going to be like, yeah, I'm not sure about that. It does count, but the thing is, this Thierry Henry curse, because it's not been broken for 17 years or something. I don't know. I almost get the feeling that there's just going to be De Bruyne is going to get sent off and be banned for the next 8 games or something. There's just no way he can do it. But yeah, I'm sure he will. Or he just comes back and he's forgotten how to play football or something like that, and it can only be attributed to the Henry curse, because everything else says, yeah, of course he will. He only needs 3 more to equal it, 4 more to beat it, and he could easily get 4 in one game. Really, if it's just going to be a training game with no crowd atmosphere. City are perfectly programmed to do that, and I heard you speaking to Andy earlier. Poor old Burnley. It's not ideal for their first game, and maybe it will be because City will be knackered from Wednesday night or whatever. But if it's going to be a training game, you can just see De Bruyne putting those balls in all day.
I'm getting a lot of noise in my ear, and that's just a lot of Burnley fans and angry Arsenal fans telling me off for saying De Bruyne is going to break the record. Good.
This time
how
next
is
week, done it.
Pep Guardiola in Zoom press conferences? So I've been to a couple of press conferences with Pep, and he has a rascally demeanor face to face when he's talking to English press. How is that changing when it's done over a screen like this? Is he?
Yeah, no, it was a bit less. It was a bit less rascally, I think. But it was all right. But it was kind of hard to focus. It was. I asked a couple of questions, and to be honest, I need to go back and check what he said, because I remember the outline, but it was just really hard to focus, really. But he was all right. He was less rascally. But I mean, we're going to be doing these for ages now. And there's games every 3 or 4 days, so I'm sure he'll get used to it. But no, he was all right. He had a good line. I can't say it because 1, we already annoy people by being the Athletic, and 2, don't break an embargo. So there's another hour and a half. But he did say a couple of interesting things about. Rashford and footballers having a say on society. They were quite good as well. So there was a bit of rascalness coming out of him there, but he's just warming up basically.
This is it, the sort of era of rascal from Manchester City. I've seen some photographs of Leroy Sané now, and he looks as if he's been going to the gym and can beat up the old Leroy Sané. Yeah,
well, it's a bit of a weird one because everyone who comes back from a knee injury, even City never put their injured players in the reserves, in the under-23s. It just doesn't happen. But a year ago, whenever it was, they played him against Arsenal in one of the under-23 games on a Friday night. And then they would have 20 minutes here, 10 minutes there just to get back. But just as he was coming back, he's had 3 months off. So it's going to be a really weird one to work out how he comes back from a knee injury. And I guess part of that, making sure he's fit, is bulking up. But that's never always the best way for footballer, is it? City fans will know Benjamin Mendy's bulked up quite a bit, but he doesn't look himself. And Sané is kind of so agile and so quick and so nimble. I wouldn't be surprised if he lost a bit if he was a bit chunkier. But I suppose if he can adapt his game with it, then it hasn't stopped Adama Traore. If he can start playing with somebody with that kind of physique, then it won't be a problem. But it could go either way, because when players start bulking up after injuries, it does cause them problems sometimes.
Sam, you're painting the picture of a confident shrug from Manchester City right now. Just sort of yeah, we're good, but maybe?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, everyone knows they're most likely not going to, they're just not going to win the league. They know that. But it's kind of it's just a big build-up for the Champions League. Guardiola always uses the Premier League to get in gear for the Champions League anyway, when it's Saturday, Wednesday. But now it's just 9 games in a row. The way he was talking today, he didn't sound too confident about injuries and stuff. Even with a bigger squad as City, he was like, I know how we're going to play on Wednesday, but against Burnley, don't know. Beyond that, don't know. Somebody asked him, he goes, you're going to use a lot of ice baths. He's like, we can't do ice baths. Like, there's no ice baths, there's no massages. Like, so there's going to be a lot of problems, obviously, for other clubs as well. But by the time they've done these games, maybe a couple more in the FA Cup, if they can then go and play Real Madrid and have a good run at it, that's when it's going to be really interesting. Now it's kind of exciting and, oh yeah, we'll see what happens. But so many unknowns. But in about 6 weeks' time, that is, to borrow a phrase which has probably been used already tonight, knowing all the Office fans on here, but that will be the real quiz in about 6 weeks.
So you're painting a picture of Manchester City winning the Champions League in an empty stadium and just sort of leaving it there and being like, we'll see you in court.
Yeah, well, there's the mic drop, and I'll hand over to James to pick up that baton.
Hello, James. How are you doing?
How you doing, Carl? You okay?
I'm feeling good. This has been a fun hour. Hello. Thank you for everyone who's joined the stream and talked to everyone. Thanks to James McNicholas as well for being the host for the first hour as well. Right, this is what we've been doing. We've been talking about every single Premier League team, talking to all the experts, all the club correspondents as part of the Athletic, and basically going, what's going on at your club? Because we care about your club. Right now, new subscribers can get 40% off to the Athletic by going to athletic.com/all20teams. James, I'm going to ask you a question first. Before I do it, I'm going to just start drawing an asterisk. No, that's mean. That's very, very mean. That is very mean. What's going on at Liverpool right now?
I think there's a fair bit of excitement. I think it's been a long, long wait. I think the champagne was on ice back in early March, and Liverpool's so close to this historic triumph. And then, of course, with the lockdown, I think a lot of fans wondered whether this time would ever actually come, whether this season would get played to a finish. So yeah, finally, it's probably feels like 3 years rather than 3 months. But now Liverpool are on the verge of that historic first title since 1990.
It's going to happen. I suppose the break in football was also let other football fans slowly make peace with the fact that it's going to happen, and just slowly I make peace with all of their Liverpool supporting friends. One of my best friends supports Liverpool, and I've just decided to make friends with him over how much I love Naby Keita. So James, please tell me some good news about Naby Keita.
Well, do you know what? He's looked very sharp since they went back to Melwood a few weeks back, and you know, anyone who's seen the highlights from the warm-up game they had against Blackburn Rovers at Anfield last week when they hammered the Championship side 6-0 would have seen that there were lots of promising signs from Naby Keita. I think I don't think his quality has ever been in any question, has it? I think when the problem for Liverpool has been trying to keep him fit over a sustained period. So you know, I think for people like him and you know, these closing 9 games are really big to show the Klopp that they kind of command bigger roles going into next season. Because I think, you know, it's you know, all but an absolute certainty the title is going to be won. But you know, for those players, every single game counts with one eye on the longer term.
It is a very interesting scenario. Obviously, members of Liverpool right now have said, we're not going to take our foot off the pedal. We're not going to chill out. We're not going to be, you know, towels on the deck chair, shall we say. But also, maybe? Are Liverpool going to be this pressing colossus that we saw in the autumn?
I think it's going to be interesting, isn't it? I think no one quite knows how things are going to come back after, you know, what has been an unprecedented period. I think for them, you remember back, you know, they were having a little wobble before the shutdown. You know, performance levels had dropped a bit. There was a lot of talk about, you know, the rhythm seemed to disappear a game a little bit. You know, they really went against Atletico Madrid in the second leg in the Champions League, but it wasn't good enough to go through. But before that, you know, you think of the defeat at Watford, and of course they went out the FA Cup as well. So I think it's important, you know, not just to get the remaining points to wrap up the title, but to get that fluency back, to get playing with a bit of sparkle. But I also do think we will see Klopp experiment a bit as well. I think, you know, there's some really talented young players coming through in Harvey Elliott and Curtis Jones and Nico Williams, and I also think, you know, with the way that
it's set up now with the 5 substitutes. It does give managers the chance to shake it up a bit more, and I think we'll see them feature during the run-in as well.
Just to double check, clean bill of health for everyone at Liverpool. The return of Matip as well.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the ones who had knocks, of course, going into that break, they've all long since recovered. Of course, Alisson, the goalkeeper, was injured prior to that, but he's absolutely fine now. I think a few issues. I think there was no Robertson, no Salah. I think Oxlade-Chamberlain went off with a knock in that game against Blackburn last week. So a few things for them to keep an eye on this week. But no, I think not too many worries on that front. Just massive excitement going into these Merseyside derby, and of course all eyes will be on City Arsenal, because if Arsenal do the business, then there is that prospect of that 19th domestic title just across Stanley Park against Everton.
It might just happen. One thing I want to talk to you as sort of journalist to journalist or like writer to writer is, you've been covering Liverpool for many, many seasons, and for a long time it's looked like Liverpool are going to win the Premier League. How do you write knowing it's mostly good news every weekend? We're like, oh, we're probably going to win. Hooray. How do you write Liverpool are really good every 3 days?
Yeah, it's in a funny kind of way. It's actually been quite challenging this season, because you're right. You usually, quite a large amount of the articles you write, addressing problem areas, and what are the big headaches for Klopp going into this game? How does he solve this dilemma and this issue? And the reality is he hasn't had that. It was, for a while it was, I suppose it was a bit of, they were leaking City goals, and they went quite a while without a clean sheet. But even that it's a bit ridiculous to dwell on that when they're churning out wins so absolutely relentlessly. So yeah, we're talking about a Liverpool team that's set benchmarks and new records almost on a weekly basis. 82 points out of a possible 87 so far. So yeah, I've had to kind of look pretty deep to try with news and all the rest of it this season, because it probably gets bring us for Liverpool's rivals week in, week out. But I don't think Liverpool fans will ever tire of it.
It's going to be genuinely brilliant, and I want to say thank you, because I've just been on The Athletic as well, and I found you've just got a great interview with Steven Gerrard. It's genuinely like, what a thoroughly nice conversation these two people have had. So I look forward to reading more of your great stuff as you sort of probably write Liverpool good 3 times a week again, because football is back. It's good. Football's back. It might be good again. It might not be good again. Liverpool might be good again. They might not be good again. It's 9 games. I'm going to call this the Premier League clausura. You can Wikipedia what that word means. It's the second half of a tournament in South American football. James, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you to everyone who's joined me for this last hour to talk about football. I'm genuinely excited now. I've talked about everything here. I've snuck in some fantasy football recommendations. I'm going to start looking for that as well. You can get unlimited free substitutes for a little bit, so you should probably do that now as well. But other than that, I'm going to get out my suit because it's quite warm. One last order of business. Yes, listener, football's back and we care about your club. So new subscribers, go to athletic.com/all20teams and you can get money off your new subscription. It's going to be really, really fun having English football back, and all of our writers are going to try their damn hardest to give you some of the best football writing on the planet Earth. No more banana bread. Time to talk about football again. Hooray! All right, the tape machines are rolling. I'll see you next week. Goodbye.